Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you are able to join us today. Today is a very special day, not only for JOAM and Genesis, but for the island of Jamaica. My name is Colleen Williams. I'm sitting in for Althea McKenzie, who will be joining us shortly. But I just want to start this meeting, this gathering, in the right way with the national anthem, which is Jamaica's Prayer. Thank you. Firstly, I would like to welcome everyone who's on this call. Our circumstances are unusual to say the least, but we are here. And we're here for some really, really good things. This is the first in our, well, we have been going around the island for the last 2 years, training on different strategies that will help to renew our soil, our land. And right after Hurricane Melissa, it is more important than ever that we learn to fall in love again with our land, with our country. So during this presentation, which will be over the next couple of hours, you are going to learn a lot about how we can begin the rebuilding and restoration process so our land can bloom and blossom again. We have a beautiful team of experts from looking at cover crops from different angles, but all of their expertise and knowledge that they'll be sharing will allow us to start the practical work of restoring our soil. But before we get into the presentations, I would like to introduce our chairman, Mrs. Janice Dehaney. This is the chairman of the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement, who are the collaborators with the Ministry of Agriculture for the Genesis project, which is a project where what you'll be learning today is a foundational piece of the Genesis project. So, Janice, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you need to do during the course of the morning? Thank you.
Everyone. Welcome to Tropical Roots Unlocking the Power of Cover Crops. Now, I'm board chair for the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement, and on behalf of the board of directors, I'd like to warmly welcome all of you. And I know it spans many countries, the Caribbean especially, and our local participants here in Jamaica. For me, this is a very special moment because we just experienced the most catastrophic event ever in Jamaica. I'm on the western side of Jamaica. I'm in Montego Bay. And so I felt the real impact of Hurricane Melissa. But I won't belabor that because this is an opportunity for us to grow, restart, um, set our targets, and just rethink how we do what we do. The importance of agriculture is more than ever very, very, very focal to whatever we do across the island. And so we are at this moment a part of this Genesis project, which came out of another issue, the situation where we had a pandemic and logistically we thought we were going to have challenges. And so we needed to, design a project that would be very helpful for the agricultural industry, but for farmers on the whole, the best practices. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining. I know we have persons from Latin America, bienvenido. I did pick up that one of our presenters, Dr. Eudoxie, is from Trinidad. And so welcome. Is it Trinity to the bone, perhaps? But I just want you to all use this opportunity to soak up, grasp all the information because we have a panel of experts who will be able to share. And cover crops is pivotal to soil fertility. And so I implore you to just sit back, relax, and go for the joy of the ride that we'll take you through. as the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement and the Genesis Project, which is a Jamaica Environmental Regenerative System. And so out of adversity comes good. And this is a very, very good opportunity for us to just enjoy and be informed of all the aspects which goes into cover cropping. So tropical roots, the power of unlocking the power of cover crops. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Janice. Coming up next will be Mrs. Nicola Shirley Phillips, who is actually the Genesis project lead. And she has been responsible for leading the team that has made this 3-year project possible and more than possible, impactful. So, Nicola, would you like to just give a little background about the Genesis project?
Thanks, everyone. I'm really happy to be here this morning, and I look forward to all the information that is going to be shared. But just a little bit about the Genesis Project. We were asked by the Ministry of Agriculture, Mining and Fishing a couple of years ago about what would you do, because there was an issue with compost, and when they spoke to us at JOAM, we said, well, we have a whole toolkit of things that we would do with the soil. So we don't just put, fertilizer on the soil like that. We have to know what the conditions are and about making our own fertilizer on island. That was really one of the instrumental pieces to this project. And so I keep reminding people that we have a 12-month growing system. We have a lot of biomass. We have the ability to make our own compost, and also to just bring in all the soil improvement strategies that we as organic farmers utilize and want to be able to share. So out of that conversation with the ministry, we came up with Genesis, and it's Jamaica Environmental Regeneration System is what Genesis stands for. But it really is a soil regeneration and fertility improvement project, and really designed to address decades of soil depletion due to poor agricultural practices, with limited knowledge of our soil biology, and really a lot of negative effects from climate change. So by addressing these issues, we bring in a wealth of soil practices that some people know and some people don't know. And it's really about educating and sometimes re-educating and reminding people how we're supposed to be dealing with the soil. So the project itself is designed in a way that we have actually 12 strategies, and strategies from making compost and introducing people to vermicomposting, the soil food web, and doing things like the Johnson Sioux bio reactor, making really quick compost, because we have the ability to do that on island. We looked at land management strategies. How are we managing the land? Are we designing them so the flow of water happens in a way that it doesn't deplete and destroy our landscapes? Looking at mulches and swales. Also bringing in things like effective microorganisms or indigenous microorganisms using EM and other strategies around that to build our soil biology. Teaching everyone about biochar, how we could improve the growth and also just improve the life of the soil by bringing in biochar. And of course, water management. Cover crops was a major piece of this. And so we know that we don't do a lot of cover cropping in Jamaica, and we've been over the years trying to introduce folks to that system that is actually, and I look globally, more and more people are using cover crops as a strategy for, building the soil, whether it is through nitrogen fixing or looking at the compaction that's happening. There's a whole lot of things that we're going to learning today about what cover crops can do. So we were blessed last year to have a webinar about it. And I said this year again, we want to make it an annual practice, not just for Jamaica, but actually really bringing the Caribbean, because we have some specific needs in the Caribbean, different a little bit from North America or even maybe some parts of South America, but bringing that wealth of knowledge so we can start to share it and really encourage people through a base of knowledge of how they can start incorporating cover crops into the system. So today is all about cover crops, and we're so blessed that we will be able to pull together a team of experts that really not just going to talk the talk, but actually walk the walk, because they have years and decades of working with cover crops in these very same systems that we have been in the Caribbean, because we have some specific needs here and we want to introduce people to it. So I'm really encouraged by the work that we've been doing across the island. We've had 2 years of teaching the various strategies. We're bringing cover crops to you. I would really encourage everyone to not just, listen, I will have my notes, taking notes, because we have all these wonderful experts here, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of that. And we have local experts as well that have been actually doing this practice and want to hear what they have been seeing from it. So again, I am grateful for everyone that has shown up to all the Genesis trainings. And we encourage, we'll have a couple more trainings before in 2026. And we encourage you all to come out and participate. If there's something that you're missing, we've had these beautiful strategy cards that tell you how to do all these different strategies. Please do reach out to us so we can spread the information. And we just want everyone to be able, especially after the situation, Melissa, if there's ever a time to pull these strategies in, this is the time. And so we are very grateful for the ministry for allowing us to have the resources to be able to go across the island and share this work. And as we do this, we continue to share and learn from everyone. Okay, I will be tuning in myself and learning from the experts. Let's get going. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Nicola. Well, just to give you a little of the course of the morning, we are going into our presentation segment where we will have five presenters just giving different perspectives about the use and impact of using cover crops in your whole agricultural system. And we are going to be asking all the participants to make notes of any questions that they may have in the chat. And after everyone has completed the presentation, we'll be taking those questions in the chat. So you will get all of your answers, but just to make sure all the presentations go smoothly, we're going to ask you to hold your questions or post them in the chat. And we're leading off with a Caribbean expert, Dr. Gaius Eudoxie, who's actually based at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad, St. Augustine's campus. And he is a passionate advocate for soil life, soil health. And he's also a senior lecturer at UWI in soil science. For over 20 years, he has been teaching and researching in soil management, and a specific focus of his research and teaching has been how to improve the quality of the soil that we work with. Jamaica and indeed the Caribbean, we have special soil. It's alive, and despite our best efforts to kill off that life, it has managed to sustain us for thousands of years. So what Dr. Eudoxie will be bringing to the table is to encourage us, to teach us some basic principles of how we can nurture that life. So Dr. Eudoxie, take it away.
Thank you very much, Chair, and let me extend compliments as well as season's greetings to not only our host, but also all our participants. It's indeed a pleasure being here, and I bring you greetings from the Faculty of Food and Agriculture at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. I also just want to indicate to our chairman of JOAM that I am St. Lucia, so not necessarily Trinity to the bone, but I am certainly a son of our Caribbean soil. And it is indeed a pleasure for me to participate in this particular and very relevant, I think, as well, when you think about the context in which Jamaica is currently recovering, very relevant workshop on soil regeneration. So it's indeed a pleasure. I'm going to, as our chair mentioned, just touch on some key elements about sustaining soil health to kind of set a context, give a foundation to understanding why particularly principles like cover crops are so important when we think about the concept of soil health. So I'm going to try to put that in perspective for our listeners and for our viewers, and hopefully be able to elaborate a little bit about what we can do as a broader package of practices to strengthen soil health. So I think it's important for us to just remember, that while it is beneath our feet, it is where we get our food. And a lot of the time, sometimes we don't pay enough attention to that. And I think it's because we do not connect our food, particularly to our soils, that we don't pay the attention that is necessary to ensure that our soils could continue to deliver that. So globally, 90% of our food comes from soil. And that is not going to change in no time in the future, in terms of the importance of soils as it pertains to food security and as well, obviously, nutrition security. So it is an essential part of our livelihoods and certainly overall our economic development within our various territories. However, because we don't necessarily connect all those dots, particularly when we look at some of the other systems that are around us that we pay more attention to, things like water, things like biodiversity, things like our climate and our air. Because we don't pay as significant attention to our soils over the decades have come under significant threat. So globally, there are 10 key, what we consider to be degradative threats that influence and affect our soil's ability to function and to deliver a number of the services, including its ability to produce food for our sustenance. We would have done a study most recently that included the Caribbean. It's called the World Status of Soil Resources, Status of the World Soil Resources. And that study, in highlighting key soil threats in the Caribbean, we recognize that there were 3 out of those 10 that were particularly concerning to us. And what topped off most is this threat of erosion. And I want us to pay particular attention to that, noting that this particular workshop specifies or focuses on Jamaica, and some of our recent hydroclimatic events would have accelerated threats like erosion. And hence, there's a need for us to recognize that we have to be thinking in a different way, in a more innovative way, more creative way, as to how can we build that resilience that is necessary to sustain this life that we have in our soils, and obviously significance to our lives as well. So this concept of soil health is a very important concept when we consider threats like erosion, because erosion seeks to degrade our soil and reduce its health. Very similar to, for instance, what COVID-19 would typically do to our human health. We have to recognize that there are threats to our soil health, and if we do not pay attention to those threats, our soils would be degraded, they will lose that health, and hence they will not be able to facilitate a lot of the services that we depend upon them on. So that concept is an important concept, and it has been accepted globally. Just up to day before yesterday, I was reading that the EU just passed its first law on soil monitoring for soil health, mandating all of its territories to implement a soil health monitoring program, because of the fact that they have recognized that soil health and maintaining it is not only essential to, obviously, our food security, but also important to things like climate change and its resilience, biodiversity loss and minimizing that, and all of those other important ecosystem services that our soil provides. So it is important for us also within our small islands to recognize the significance of soil health. And soil health really just speaks about the same way when we go and do a checkup by the doctor, they check some key characteristics of our bodies and how it functions. It is the same concept here with soil. So what we want to understand is what are these key characteristics, chemical, biological, and physical, that when we know them, we are able to determine, is the soil functioning properly in terms of the services, particularly in our instance, food production. So that concept of soil health has some principles that surround it. And it's interesting because I'm happy that, this particular workshop symposia is dealing with a principle that has not gotten attention as it should in our region. And that has, particularly if you look at one of the principles, says maximize soil cover. We could do that in a number of ways, and obviously cover crops is one of the ways in which we could do that. But that has not been a practice in our traditional agricultural setting. We have not seen the need to, unless you are an organic farmer, but our general commercial farmers have not seen the need to attend to soil health as part of a sustainable program for maintaining their own commercial productivity. So if you look at that, you realize that it's an integrated system here that seeks for us to try to minimize our disturbance on the soil, ensure that we always have living roots in the soil. That means we don't want our soil bare and exposed to degradative elements like rain and water. We want to ensure that we cover our soils as much as possible, maximize our crop biodiversity, and as well as much as possible tie that system in a circular pattern by integrating, obviously, livestock within that system. It doesn't mean that you have to have livestock there, but certainly we could appreciate the fact that you can bring in amendments from livestock production that will obviously also improve our soil health. So I just want a quick perspective, for our viewers, just to see if you compare the two soils left and right, you will quickly be able to visually see differences, and that is why this slide is there. And if I had to ask our viewers to just pick one of those soils, if you are a producer and you want to think about visual elements of soil health, I think most of us would pick the slide on the left. And there are key things that resound in our mind. One, we're seeing the color is different, and that richer, darker color is a clear indication of probably a change in our organic matter content. We're also seeing that it's not caked up and compacted, it's aggregated and has a good friability, which speaks to how the soil will respond in terms of its functions. But it clearly means that there's a difference in the management between what is on the left and what is on the right. And that is part of what soil health principles try to teach us. If we follow these principles, we likely get what is on the left, and that leads to long-term, medium and long-term improved productivity, and as well improved other ecosystem services. So what are the characteristics typically of a healthy soil? Generally, the soil should have good physical condition. It should be deep enough. Oh my, sorry about that. I did not realize that. I thought I was sharing with y'all. Apparently, I am not sharing with y'all. Just hold on. I'll pop up my apologies. So, all right. So I'm hoping that you can see the slides now. Wonderful. So I was indicating, and apologies for that, if that if everyone were not seeing it. Apologies for that. So I was saying that with characteristics of a healthy soil, you can have, or you should have, or some persons, well, you could have, or you should have good physical condition. So you should have good water storage, good soil depth, good drainage, sufficient supply of good nutrients. So that's the chemical components, yes, that we're getting. And you should also have a good biological status. So while you may not be able to differentiate biological microorganisms, you should be able to at least recognize macroarthropods and other meso and macrofauna within your soil. That is going to be a good indication that the soil has some level of biological activity, which is the principle of what healthy soils are. And what you should also be seeing is that the soils are not necessarily as fragile and are generally more resilient to degradation. So in essence, they should not have a deterioration in their quality when exposed to degradative factors. So important in us understanding how that connects is to recognize that one of the things you need to do is that, and I think our chair was mentioning that the soils in our region and in Jamaica in particular are very diverse. And as such, we need to ensure we know the soil. So that's why I have this nice little GPS location there, just signaling to us that we should know our soils. What does it mean to know our soils? It means that you, as the producer, as the farmer, as the user of that soil, should have those health characteristics tested. And I mean, I've worked with Jamaica, worked with RADA, I've worked with the ministry, so I know you'll have a very able soil testing laboratory, and that is a facility, available to our producers in Jamaica. Use that, and take advantage of that. Get to know your soil, get to understand the characteristics. You would appreciate where the limitations are, and as such, you will be able to better manage that soil from the perspective of soil health. So I do just want to highlight this, and this is just a nice textual map of Jamaica showing the vast diversity in something as simple as the physical characteristics of whether or not you have a clay, a sand, or a loam soil. Very recently, we would have concluded in partnership with RADA, and as well a regional body called the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, and as well the ministries, I think, of was it rural development, and I think as well agriculture. We would have mapped out the soils again for Jamaica. So I know there is very recent pre-Melissa data, and it's important that that data is there simply now that persons could determine if they do tests now after Melissa, how badly did your soil degrade and what might be appropriate recommendations or mechanisms or approaches to address that degradation. So that data is there. You could reach out to the soils unit, to better understand that data, because the data would have been across the entire country, and they would have been able to generate some maps for different properties, similar like what I was indicating there as biological, chemical, and physical properties in that regards. So what are some of the key things we have to focus on? In terms of particularly Jamaica, in terms of soil health, and moving from soil health to maintaining, enhancing soil health through what we call sustainable soil management practices. We have to contemplate that we have to minimize erosion. It's a big issue for us, yes, in Jamaica, particularly cockpit country, where we have a lot of those oxy soils, and we know we do a lot of the bauxite mining there as well. Big issue there. We have to think about, obviously, maintaining our physical characteristics of our soils, and at times, a nutrient imbalance. Couple of things we want to focus on there in terms of how we deal with that certainly is by ensuring organic matter content in the soil is increased. We want to enhance soil biodiversity, and to do that, we have to think about the importance of cropping systems and things like cover crops that provide not only the cover to minimize erosion, but also the living roots that are very critical in bringing soil organic matter and biodiversity back into our soils. So, what are some of the recommendations? In some areas, liming is important, not in all. More because Jamaica is a heavily calcareous area. I think the only areas that we probably in the eastern areas or along the areas of the Blue Mountains, that's probably the only areas where we may get a little bit of acidic soils. Yeah, but the vast majority of the country is calcareous in its nature, and hence liming is not significant. However, outside of our lower lying areas, organic matter is pretty low, and that is something we have to pay attention to. We also have to pay attention to the fact that a lot of these soils are degraded and have poor overall nutrient balance. So that is something we have to pay attention to. And most importantly, probably the one that is most significant is the fact that we have to pay attention to soil conservation. So I'll just use the next couple of slides just to highlight some of those key things. So as I said, generally, when we looked at the pH distribution of soils in Jamaica, I'm sorry that I don't have the maps because it was really while I was coordinating the activity, the data and information belongs to the island and country of Jamaica. So that's why I'm advising, if you do want to see those, you probably need to just contact the Soils Division surrounding that data. But most of the soils of Jamaica were circumneutral in the region of about 6, somewhere around there to about 7.5. So from that perspective, liming is not a big issue, and you'll have ideal pHs for generally productivity. That is the key function that we use in the soil. 4, as I said, towards the eastern side and the mountains to the north, you do have a little bit more acid soils there. So again, that's why it's important that you know your soil to determine whether or not one practice is important or it is not. But for the vast majority of the agricultural locations, I think the pH is ideal from that perspective. So I'm not going to focus heavily on that. Organic matter content outside of the very low-lying areas that are generally more mangrove, swamp, and wetland areas, the upland areas, the soil organic matter content is pretty low. And that is an area I think we could benefit from. I was very happy to hear from the Genesis program that a big part of that, obviously, and understanding organic agriculture is to ensure that we have organic inputs. And remember, my focus is not simply on nutrition, because a lot of the time we apply organic inputs solely for nutritional benefit. But organic inputs go way beyond just supplying nutrients. It goes as well to provide not only food, but it is the basic primary production material that starts the soil food web. Without organic material in there, our microbes have nothing to feed on. The mesofauna, the macrofauna that feed on them don't have nothing to feed on, and then we cannot get that soil biodiversity enhancing. So organic matter is very important. We could apply it, and I would suggest that if we are applying it, let us preferably use compost, as it's a more stable form that brings other benefits to the soil rather than manure. But manure could work once it's properly cured, and we reduce some of the phytotoxic as well as nutrient potential leaching effects of it. So it is something for us to consider as part of not just an organic production system, but also a general sustainable practice, because our temperatures and rainfall allows for very fast decomposition. we have to consistently maintain the organic matter content. So applying organic amendments in a circulatory system is one good practice, but it's not the only one, but it is one good practice. In addition to that, we do have issues about fertility management. And the fertility management is not only ensuring that you have an organic source of fertilizer or an inorganic source of fertilizer. There are 4 principles I just want to share with you that we have to consider when we're thinking about integrated fertility management. That tends to, if we get them right, tends to allow for us to minimize nutrient loss and the potential for damage, particularly environmental pollution, and to ensure we maximize not only productivity agronomically, but also we maximize it economically by not wasting money on nutrients that we did not have to add. So they call them the 4 R's. Ensuring that we have the right source of fertilizer, the right rates, and that is dependent on your soil testing, and that's why I'm using that as my takeaway. The right timing, understanding your crop and its physiological stages and when the nutrients are required. And certainly, probably the most low-hanging fruit we have is the right placement. Once you are not growing a crop that covers the entire area, when I say so, a surface area like a vining crop or something that has very close planting, like even things like corn, we have to also remember that placement is important. And one of the key things we can think about in placement is something we now really working hard with farmers here in Trinidad is ensuring that you have deep placement, of the fertilizer. So that is very important from that perspective. So we have to bear that in mind. The most important thing, however, and as I said, for our participants from Jamaica, you all would be the bearers of that, and you all would have seen that firsthand in the most obviously tragic way through Hurricane Melissa, is the loss of your soil that comes with intense events like hurricanes. One of the ways in which we could ensure we minimize that is to ensure that at no point in time, or at least to the as minimum as we can, we always ensure we have soil conservation practices in place, particularly obviously if we're going along our undulating lands, which is obviously the greater part of the arable lands in Jamaica. These lands are not necessarily always flat, and we have to bear in mind that they would have these susceptibilities. So they have a number of mechanisms that you can use. Cover crops is one of those mechanisms, and it's a very important mechanism because it's a mechanism that allows for you to ensure that you do not leave the soil bare in times or between your main productive crops, such that there's always living roots in the soil, that is enhancing that overall productivity. And as well, you also have not just the living roots, but you also have the organic matter that is coming from that cover crop. So just wrapping up here, I just wanted us to recognize that the cover crops have a significant influence on soil health. And it is a practice that we have been missing. So a lot of what we do traditionally, even when we try to enhance our productivity and enhance our soil health, is by adding just organic matter. But we have done a lot of work here in Trinidad, and we have seen the application of organic matter, whether stable or not, is not sufficient to enhancing soil health. And other practices, including things like cover crops, are very important for building and sustaining that soil health. And you see the number of benefits that it brings us. So I think we are in a good position with this workshop, and I'm very happy that we are addressing that. And it is just a matter of seeing how best we could implement those going forward. So again, thank you so very much for that opportunity to have a conversation with you all. And I will remain here certainly for the question and answer. So thank us again, Chair.
And thank you so much, Dr. Eudoxie. What you have done is provide the framework, the context for everything that we'll be discussing today. And we really do appreciate it. And yes, we'll be having lots of questions afterwards. Our next presenter will be looking at soil health and soil management through a slightly different lens. He is bringing in the impact of water on soil health and how cover crops help to close that cycle because soil does not exist in a vacuum. So Mr. Robert Wally will be coming to us actually from Honduras, and he will be assisted in his presentation by Stacy Schwartz, who is in the US. And what they will be focusing on will enrich the picture that is being created. So, Mr. Wally, would you like to open your mic? Thank you.
Hello. Good morning from Honduras. I'm going to speak a little bit about the agronomic management of cover crops and in some of the larger perennial crops as well. I think many of the principles are just the same. You find most of the times when we're using cover crops, we're using in a very agronomic way. In other words, we are trying to generate a lot of material in a small space for use in crop rotations. And these rotations are used to provide fertility for following crops. Most of the time, in the agronomic sense, this is for maize and beans. We also have similar conditions true in Jamaica, where we are trying to produce as much organic matter as we possibly can, because this organic matter for us is the major source of crop nutrients. So many times, to increase the amount of nutrients, we will both grow crops in a rotation, and we will bring in crops from other areas that we cut and carry to add soil fertility to the thing. Now, the advantages of cover crops, when we plant them dense enough, weeds are outcompeted. And I must be very careful to say this, that we must get enough cover crops in there, because many times in Honduras, and I'm sure in Jamaica as well, people aren't planting the crops dense enough, and we don't get the biomass that we need to improve the production of the following crop, and we don't get enough of the nutrient and the nitrogen fixation that is available to us. Now, this competition continues, especially when the mulch is cut and dropped in place as mulch. Many times this time we want to outcompete all of the other crops which are in place at the time. Most of that is maize and bean, but some other horticultural crops, as I will discuss. This has been the number one thing that makes the mulching attractive in cover crops is the labor saving from weeding. This makes it very, very attractive to the farmer. And many times they will only pass for the weeding operation one time, sometimes two times at the most, because people don't want to put that much effort into the agronomic crops and save that labor for their horticultural crops. On the surface, this mulch protects the soil from the erosive forces, as the previous doctor explained to us. This erosive forces many times is actual gravity and the actual impact of individual soil particles they're receiving from the soil surface that is unprotected. So people are trying as much as they can to apply cover crops to reduce these erosive forces. Mulch will also reduce the evaporation that is taking place in the soil. This evaporation is very important to control. The mulch reduces that because the plants no longer have complete contact with the unprotected soil. They're protected by the mulch, but sometimes this mulch may host pests and diseases. I think that is very important. Earlier in the discussion group that we were having, people discussed that we need to consider that after changes in hurricanes, such as we've suffered several times in Honduras, starting with Hurricane Mitch, Fifi, and others, there is an increased outbreak in pests after the storms. So please watch for this. This mulch may also host pests. Many times when you see in recommendations for agronomy, people will say that you need to remove all of the existing crop materials. This is not always necessary, but please be vigilant for what you need to, what your system needs to accomplish, because sometimes these pests can be very damaging. I mean, some pests can overwinter in the crops. They cause very much diseases and insect pests in the following crops. And this is probably going to be one of the big problems that you will see right after this hurricane. The advantage is in the soil. So there has been for the soil and also on the surface of the soil, but also in the soil. The roots die, and with cutting and decomposition, they help to fertilize the following crops. It's very important that mineralization, the process of mineralization occurs in these crops, because as the roots die and they decompose, this is when they liberate their nutrients. Even legumes, most of the time, they're liberating the nitrogen that they have accumulated in its biomass. They only are liberating that through crop mineralization. The added humates, and we say humates, those are just humic acids and other materials that are present in, we know the word humus, so that's where humates come from. They're biostimulants for the succeeding crops, and they have been shown to have a positive effect. And many times the crops need these effects, even though they're quite small, they are significant. It is this organic matter that keeps the soil alive. Keeps the soil alive, conserves moisture. Those two things are the most important activities of the organic matter in the soil. And we need to continue, as the previous doctor said, we need to help keep the soil alive, conserve the moisture, because in reality, it is a lot of times the water and everything which is in the material that is really what has helped conserving and improving yields for following crops. Now, just review for a little bit. This is one little picture of a cover crop plot that we have just to producing cover crops. When we produce them, they're not on a small scale. People like to roost them on a large scale because they need the cover crops and they don't want to worry about having them. So people are very self-sufficient. And I think that is a good thing, especially as we come into after the hurricane. We'll find that we need a lot of cover crop seeds. And so we can get those and grow them ourselves. With using cover crops, we have fewer weeds, as the doctor noticed. We'll find differences after the hurricane with that, but the control of the weeds is the number one thing that farmers like. They don't want to use herbicides. In Central America, and maybe even in Jamaica, people have even used gasoline and other substances to control weeds. This is very bad. This inhibits the fertility of the soil. Soil benefits from greater fertility, and it's a cycle. We need to continue this greater fertility for our soils. Soils will find a way to recover themselves, but they need the help with you, from the farmer. Protecting these soils from erosion is very important, as the previous doctor mentioned. Erosion is a very insidious thing because it's sometimes called the quiet crisis. It can be so slow, or it can be very fast. In a storm, we see it's very fast. But when soil erodes, soil erosion takes place slowly, and it takes away the particles that are the most fertile in the beginning. It takes those away first. So control of erosion is very important. And also water conservation, as I have mentioned, is very important to help the crop. The crop health is very important, containing all the new mineral nutrients, and most of these are available through the water, which is in the soil. In horticulture, we must have enough material to mulch with and improve the soil. This is very important. Having enough material, and I will discuss that in 1 minute, is very important, that we have enough of this material that we can use it to improve the soil and get the advantages from the plant, leguminous plants, and also from the plants which we're trying to plant. We're trying to plant within the system. Selecting these plants is very important. As I mentioned earlier, space is a challenge sometimes in reproducing enough seeds. To accomplish this, intercropping is very important. We have been able to do that in Honduras, and I'm sure that you can in Jamaica as well. The intercropping of the seeds for vegetative material, sometimes just reproducing the seeds, is very important to continue always to have the soil occupied or covered. And one final note, we need to use companion planting, because plants have been found to contain certain substances that will repel pests. These are much more environmentally friendly than pesticides that are used. And so to try to continue using plants to repel pests, we need further investigations and further studies to determine which plants. Now, some of these are very well known. People understand the planting of garlic, onions, and other plants to repel pests. On a small level, sometimes this is very difficult, and sometimes it is better to have massive plantings or plantings in a rotation, such as marigold, to get rid of the entire nematodes. Because yes, nematodes can be repelled by them, but they are only repelled from where they find the marigolds growing. They must be planted in a high density of plants to be able to continue to repelling. Many times there is not enough density for those. Here is a soil that is well amended, and they plant in very dense, because farmers will generally have enough cover crop seeds all the time, because the cover crop is a very important part of the system, and they will use them and make sure that they have enough seeds to continue planting. Here's a parcel which is just being ready to plant. You will see that they're using Cannavale ensiformis or jack bean to continue to try and cover the soil all the time. This will be later cut and applied as mulch. So people are very interested in cover cropping continually to maintain the soil fertility that they have. As you can see, some of these soils are very infertile and they need a lot of organic matter. And as well, they're exposed to sunlight, which degrades the soil and requires much more organic matter as the temperature is increased. I want to show you this one slide because it shows Cannavale planted, and if you can look very carefully, you will see some cacao. They're saying that these systems, they need the added fertility, but sometimes just adding one legume is not enough. It's not enough to get one plant because that one plant has to die and mineralize its nitrogen before it can be used by the successive crops. So this is very good in agroecology to have enough diversity of plants, but you must remember there must be a significant mass of plants, of the plants that you want to grow and that you see a good positive effect for, that can carry out all the things that you want to do with those soils. Many times, one plant will not be enough, as you can see from this, to supply nitrogen for all the other plants which are present in the system, such as cacao. Perennial crops are very different from having, they must be selected. The right crop for the right purpose is very important. Many crops, they will not work because their architecture is not as good as it should be. Because when they're young, they can survive, but quickly they will outcompete other plants. And we do not want this in any type of perennial crops. In perennial crops, the uptake of nitrogen is for a longer time. And this is an advantage that we have. So for many of the crops here, and I'm sure they're present in Jamaica as well, this uptake and this window of availability for the nitrogen is very important to us. So therefore, it is very important to select the right crop, cover crop, for the right purpose. Here we have a slide showing cover crops used in coffee. Many times it is very difficult with the coffee. On the bottom of the screen, you will see a plant called oxalis, which is not a clover. Excuse me. They're asking for everything we want, but we can get that from one plant. And this plant here is Arachis pintoi. It's a very difficult one to establish, but it requires humidity. It requires humidity and helping the plants get established. But Arachis pintoi is one of the best cover crops that you can get for coffee, where it's humid, in a humid environment. Here is a picture from the FAO, but I believe it was taken in Honduras as well. I see that people are having a hard time listening. I was just recently at a cover crop conference for plantain. And this is one of the number one things that was mentioned within this conference was the ability to keep the soil covered and to use it to grow plantains. They were having a very, very hard time with some of the perennial crops and getting them established and getting enough nitrogen, so they had to use legumes. So this parcel is grown under complete agroecological conditions, and it offers a solution for many of the plantain farmers. Now, plantain is a very important crop for Honduras. It is also an important crop for Jamaica as well, and it is very possible to grow plantains under a low chemical regime. Much research is being done on resistant varieties and other varieties which are resistant to new diseases which are coming, such as Fusarium rice 4. People will need this type of intervention, and cover crops can provide both the control for weeds instead of herbicides and for nitrogen fertilization in these important crops. Here is a plantain, not plantain. Here's a planting of oil palm. I understand there's a very few parts of oil palm in Jamaica, but there are some, and you'll note that they've had to cut around the trees, each individual trees, to maintain this cover crop. But they have been able to maintain it fairly well, weed-free, only using organic methods, and this is important that we will continue to do this. I think this is very important for the future, that perennial crops are used. And now I will present my colleague, Stacy Swartz, who will talk about the selection of individual plants for their inclusion into these different systems. Thank you very much.
The crop behind me, cowpea, is a versatile crop. It has hundreds of developed varieties. Some varieties grow in moist conditions, while others thrive in arid regions. Its new leaves, green beans, and dried pulse, or dried bean, are all edible. It can also be used for fodder production and intercrops well with most cereal grains to help retain soil moisture during the growing season. So these green manure cover crops are not just for soil health and for weed control, but can be used for a diversity of attributes. There are also many species of cover crops around the world. They each have their own physical traits that may be applicable in different contexts or helpful to overcome various obstacles that farmers face. Our hope is that you would explore the potential of one or more of these crops on your farm in order to better understand how they grow in your system or how they may help you achieve your goals. To help you determine what might be good crops to start with for your context, ECHO developed a green manure cover crop selection tool. I am now going to demonstrate how to use this tool to help you determine what GMCCs might be helpful to trial in your context, given your challenges and your needs. I'm going to pretend I am a farmer near Ranchi, India. One of the cool features about the selection tool is that as you change these indicators on the left, the recommendation list here on the right are going to change in live time. So let's get started. To find out how much rainfall and what temperatures crops experience during the season I want to grow the crop, I can go to all sorts of websites. I will often use information from World Weather Online or climate data resources. I can see that year-round, average temperatures stay between 15 and 32 degrees Celsius. So I can put that in by simply clicking and holding these blue circles and dragging them in. Alternatively, I can also type these values into these boxes. Okay, so that did not narrow down our focus on which cover crops to try quite yet. Next, I can see that from June to September is the rainy season, in which we get between 1,000 and 1,500 millimeters of rain. October to May is the drier season, in which we get between 0 and 100 millimeters of rain. That dry season is too dry to get any plants to start, so let's go with putting in a cover crop at the tail end of the rainy season after the grain production is done. This could be the last 2 months, which would be between 0 and 700 millimeters of rainfall. I can put that in again by simply clicking and holding these circles and dragging them in. Alternatively, I can type the values into these boxes. Now we can see that we have lost 4 crop options that won't grow well in that type of climate. They may require more water. Next, if I want to, I can put in the altitude. I don't think it will make much a difference since it is not a high altitude, but let's go ahead and do it. Ranchi is 694 meters above sea level, so I can go ahead and enable this function of the tool by clicking this box and then toggle the circle again, or just type the value into this box. Okay, now if I scroll down a little and look at the intended uses, I have some options. If I want an edible product myself for market or for home consumption, I can click this use and see how my recommendations drop. I have 8 crops left. Or if I have animals I would like to feed with the crop, I can click this option and see how my recommendations change. 11 left. Or if I really just want to invest in soil health, I can click the soil cover/improvement option, and the list will reorganize based on the potential nitrogen accumulation of the crop instead of biomass production. This parameter has a lot to do with whether or not a crop forms relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. Lastly, I can choose a specific growth habit if I want. If the cover crop is going to be intercropped with a grain crop, such as maize, perhaps I want it to be erect, which limits the recommendations to 6 crops. Or perhaps I'm okay with it going a little into the maize or other grain crop rows. I can click semi-erect and gain 4 more crop options. Now under my options, the top recommendation will be the highest potential nitrogen accumulation, since I still have the soil improvement option selected. If I take that off, it will resort this list by biomass production. If I click on each crop, information about that specific crop will pop down, giving me more details including its growth cycle, early growth phase, potential anti-nutrients, and tolerances. Try looking for crops that fit in certain cropping windows for your region. The more specific you go with your options, the more narrow your recommendations will be. If you find yourself stuck with no options, try to figure out why that might be. Are you growing in a season that is not suitable? Did you type in a number wrong? As always, if you think of a way to enhance this tool or have helpful feedback for others, please let us know.
Wow, the information that is coming out today, it's invaluable. And we will be sharing the tool that was just on the screen with the participants and with anybody else who's interested in accessing it. Well, at this point, I would like to bring on board Althea McKenzie. You may know her as the host of Farm Talk on Power 106, and she is our special friend and collaborator, all things Genesis, all things JOAM. Althea, thank you for battling it through the wilds of the Jamaican traffic to be with us, and I gladly pass the baton to you to continue the rest of today's activities.
Very much, Colleen. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I was able to get the presentation that just went, and the one prior to that, absolutely amazing. A pleasure, as always, to be working with the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement, JOAM, to do this kind of work. It is critical work. And as we take a look at tropical roots unlocking the power of cover crops, I must tell you that I did not know that cover crops were so important. And so this work that is being done really is very critical. The presentations have been fantastic so far. And we expect that as we go throughout the morning, we are going to be engaging in conversation among ourselves, because this is how we learn. So I'm very happy to be able to join you in this kind of a way. Excellent work by Colleen earlier on. And as Colleen says, I'm a friend. I no longer consider myself a work. This is not a working relationship. This is just a family relationship. Anyway, Nicola says I'm her cousin, so that works. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to make sure that you're writing your questions, you're putting them in the chat. So a little bit later on, we will go through those questions as we engage each other throughout this process. I want to introduce our next presenter, Stuart Wise, and this is Dr. Stuart Wise. This gentleman brings a lot of professional experience to the work that is being done here this afternoon. ACDI Voca Senior Regenerative Agriculture, Livestock and Forage Consultant for the USAID, sole proprietor of Earth Island Solutions Advanced Agricultural and Environmental Systems Consulting International, Texas A&M AgriLife Research, the Norman Borlaug Institute for International Agriculture and Development, Assistant Professor, Horticultural Plant and Soil Sciences at Tarleton State University, Assistant Professor of Agronomy and Agronomy Research, Program Leader, the University of the Virgin Islands, Tropical Horticultural Crop Program Leader, the University of the Virgin Islands, Courtesy Faculty Agronomy, University of South Florida, Courtesy Faculty Agronomy Department, University of Florida, Assistant Professor of Agronomy and Agronomy Research Program Leader, the University of the Virgin Islands. And I could go on and on. This gentleman has been consulting at several institutions and, of course, organizations. And it is our distinct pleasure to welcome him to share his wealth of knowledge with us this morning. Please make him welcome.
You can see it. Do we have confirmation?
Go ahead, we're ready and waiting.
All right. I should still be on. I want to get confirmation that I'm on. Good to go. All right, perfect. That was the confirmation I was waiting on. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I forgot that. I guess I have gotten older and I've been around that long. I couldn't be happier to be here, and I couldn't be, I guess, more supportive with especially what's going on in Jamaica currently with Hurricane Melissa. Fortunately, unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience working with post-disaster agricultural relief efforts throughout the Caribbean and in other parts of the world. And so it's kind of wanted to start off and say, especially for our farmers out west in the western half, and all farmers and everyone that's been suffering through Melissa, I get it. I know where you guys are at, and I guess, not to bemoan, as was stated earlier in the introduction, the trials and tribulations of the past, but looking forward to the future of where Jamaica can go, and using this as a great opportunity to reset and redefined agricultural production for Jamaica, turning that horrible disaster into a prime opportunity for growth and development and sustainability and food system recharge. So that's why I started out with this picture, my home screen picture on the presentation. This is actually in Haiti, close neighbor. This is the western side of Haiti, and actually Île Vache, Haiti, which is a smaller island in the bay just south of southwestern Haiti. I did a lot of work there. One of the ways I define myself, aside from all of those titles that were listed in my introduction, is I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer first, and then after that, I'd say I'm a farm builder. I build farms. I design farms. I turn lands into productive lands. And that's my vision, is working from that whole systems perspective. And cover crops are an absolute key to do that. And so this picture here, starting out in Haiti, is one of the farms that we went in and salvaged, and a community farm that was developed, that is still in operation. If you know what's been going on in Haiti for the past, oh my gosh, 8 years or so, they and especially in extremely rural, isolated areas like the Elavash region, these farms have kept the country and kept the people sustained, fed, and healthy. And that's amazing. So this was actually right after, 3 months after Hurricane Matthew in 2016. This was in January of 2016, or sorry, January of 2017, following Hurricane Matthew there in Haiti. And so the potential for rapid rebirth, rapid redevelopment, rapid food production is not just possible, but incredibly opportune, and can be accomplished. And so you can see the regeneration of that farm. In this case, these farms were 100% loss, and they've been turned into amazing productive farms. So that's my little introduction on kind of where I'm at. And so I see lots of opportunities. And before I get into a lot of the key tools that we can do as organic farmers, is to kind of introduce some quick new concepts. And I won't go through and read all these slides, and these presentations will be available to all farmers for everyone to access. I'm going to move through them. I have quite a bit of material, and I wanted to get more out there than what I have time to actually present, so that everyone can use this as a great resource moving forward, even if I don't have time to cover everything as in depth as possible. So organic agriculture is a base. It's a concept everyone should be aware of. Regenerative agriculture takes that a step farther. So I was an organic agriculturalist, still am. I do organic agriculture on my own farm. I'm a vegetable farmer. I'm a livestock farmer. I have high tunnels. I do watermelons. I do specialty crops. I do actually dragon fruit, to believe it or not, here in Texas in my high tunnels, as well as other crops that are field crops. But regenerative agriculture is that approach where soil is the base. So Dr. Eudoxia was discussing all the soil health. Well, the regenerative agriculture is a further development of organic agriculture without having some of the constraints or the different particulars of organic agriculture. So regenerative agriculture is where the soil and soil health is really the founding principles. And then all of those benefits that he discussed are kind of follow up. Moving in and through regenerative agriculture, we have a term that we use often is agroecology. And this is an augment to the organic perspective. So agroecology is that approach to agriculture that views agriculture as an ecosystem. It's that systems approach to agriculture. It focuses on biological, chemical, physical processes. It emphasizes symbiotic relationships like the nitrogen fixation that everyone's aware of, whether it's through fixation in association with rhizobium bacteria, with legumes, or it's free amoebic or other type of a relationship, such as fungal, as far as mycorrhizal fungal relationships. And then also the principles of biodiversity. And the biggest principle of biodiversity, everyone says biodiversity this, biodiversity that, is it's really simple. As biodiversity increases, your system increases in its sustainability. The stability of your system increases with biodiversity. So, the lowest level of biodiversity would be that monoculture crop. Okay. The highest level would be like the rainforest ecosystem, where you have hundreds and thousands of different species interconnected in that web of life, not just plant, but plant, biological, as far as microbiological, macrobiological, everything that's part of that system. So that's the importance of biodiversity, is they create a stable environment that resists extreme change. It resists disasters. It resists extreme temperatures, drought, flood. It resists pests. So that biodiversity is a really key concept. So here we're broadening our framework from just organic, and now looking at organic through regenerative ag, organic through agroecological type principles. Okay, so that agroecological approach with regenerative agriculture, it protects biodiversity, it improves soil health, it puts certain management practices at the forefront, which are going to build that potential for soil health. All right, and so we've already gone into soil health. We've talked about this already in the previous presentations, but the basic is that as we increase our soil health and as we increase our management practices, we're able to resist environmental stress. That environmental stress can take the form of a hurricane, it can be a drought, it can be just excessive rain, it could be pest or disease presence. So when you have healthy soil and you have a healthy microbiome, you give the plants what they need in order to resist these stress. That's the soil provides the foundational framework for the autoimmune system of the plant. That's the plant's immunity, whether it's through endophytic relationships with bacteria or beneficial microbes or beneficial fungi. That ability to resist those stresses is what we're really going for, and that's how we wean ourselves off and eliminate the need for high inputs such as synthetic fertilizers and reliance on pesticides and other herbicides, pesticides, for example. Okay, all right, so we looked at some pictures already about degraded versus healthy soils. And so, especially when you're in a sloped environment, and many of the farms in Jamaica operate on sloped land. Whenever you have any type of slope, the potential for degradation, soil erosion is much greater. And so when you have those degraded soils, you lose the soil's ability to have that beneficial symbiotic relationship with the microbes and with the other processes, both biological, chemical, and physical. All right, so smallholder farming systems. Many of our island farming systems are based on smallholder farming systems of 1 acre or less, maybe 5 acres or less. Those smallholder farming systems are often on marginal land. You have to use the land that you have. You don't have the opportunity to just plant on flat level land, and so that factor is a huge component. And the cover crops and the crop rotations that you employ, because cover crops are just part of your crop rotation, but designing that crop rotation, which we'll talk about in more detail later, is the integral part. And so the smallholder farmer systems are typically at greater risk for natural disasters. They typically have lower soil fertility, and they're at much greater risk for potential land degradation. Okay, we talk about soil erosion, and we are like, well, what does that really mean? And the whole adage is a photo is worth 1,000 words. Well, a video is worth 1,000,000 words. And so I'm going to run this, and hopefully this will play through. This is in St. Croix. As mentioned in my intro, I did nearly 20 years in St. Croix as a smallholder farmer specialist, working with integrated farm systems in the Virgin Islands, but also throughout the Caribbean. In Central America as well. So this is on a local farm there in St. Croix, USVI, and this was not a disaster event. This was just a standard heavy pre-rainy season or rainy season rain event. And so you can see how the bare soil and the way that the furrows were constructed heavily contributes to a mass of water movement from the field to the sidebar ditches. Okay, this is a moderate slope. I wouldn't even consider this a hill, but it's a slope of probably, and I don't know, 3%, 4%, or less, maybe 2.5%. But the amount of water that's moving out of that field is taking your topsoil with it. And when you're losing your topsoil, you're losing your organic matter. Okay, you're losing that soil, that the ability to function properly. And so if this was in a cover crop and if the mechanical design, setup, layout of the field had been arranged differently, you would be capturing that water instead of losing the water. And not just losing the water, but you can see the amount of topsoil, the coloration of the soil, of the water that's moving that topsoil out of the field. And that is our precious commodity that we have to preserve. So that's the impetus for cover crops in that sense. Okay. And so what are those regenerative ag practices that do it? We talked about these as well, keeping the soil covered, producing that mulch, that surface mulch, and the cover crop is the easiest way to produce that mulch. And I might throw in here now with the amount of vegetation that is going to be clogging the system and having to be dealt with as a result of Hurricane Maria, or sorry, that was our Hurricane Melissa. That's an opportunity as well. It's a tough feature to deal with, but it can be redirected as an organic amendment to the farmers and to the farming community, hopefully through proper waste management there in Jamaica. Okay, so soil carbon. I'm not going to go deep into this. I wanted to point out one important component that's relevant to cover crops that has not been brought up yet by previous speakers, and that is called the liquid carbon pathway. All right, we all know that soil organic matter is important. It supports the microbiome. It's the the support for the roots. It's all these amazing things, but where cover crops come into play is whether it's a perennial system or an annual system, which I'm going to focus on here hopefully really quickly, is what we call the liquid carbon pathway. And that liquid carbon pathway is the amount of carbon. It's the process of carbon sequestration where the living plant, not the dead biomass, but the living plant pumps carbon into the soil. And that's exactly what it's doing. It's fixing carbon from the atmosphere. When I say it, the plant, okay, the cover crop is converting atmospheric carbon, it's sequestering it, and it's pumping it into the soil to feed the microbes at a rate of around 46%. Okay. It can be a little bit higher, it can be less, depending on the photosynthetic capacity and the carbon sequestration or the carbon fixing capacity of that particular plant. Okay, different life cycles, different lifestyle, different life maturity components have an effect on that. But the point is that your living plant is putting so much more carbon into the soil, and the carbon is what is driving that entire nutrient cycle, okay, with your microbes. That's why if you have good soil organic matter, all right, the need for synthetic fertilization is greatly or completely eliminated because the microbes are feeding on that organic matter, which are then converting it into the nitrogen. So yes, the residue and the actual plant decomposing, the physical plant decomposing, is going to contribute, to that nutrient in the nutrient level in the soil as far as green manure goes. But the living plant does so much more. Okay, the living plant, and it's secreting the carbon with sugars. Okay, it's secreting it through plant root exudates, and that is driving the system. All right, so that's why the living plant is so critical in a tremendous way. All right, of course, all the other stuff as well about building soil organic matter. All right, so each 1% of soil organic matter contains 1,000 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen. All right, right here. All right, next, water dynamics, same thing. I'm just going to point this out. For 1% increase in soil organic matter, soils can hold an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. When you start holding water in the soil, you stop running off soil. So in a traditional rainfall, the soil is typically only holding about 1 inch of rain, and then everything else runs off. So if you get a 2-inch rain, 1 inch is going into the soil, 1 inch is leaving the field, carrying everything else with it. If you increase your soil organic matter, you're going to capture more of that, and you might get 1.5, or you might get all 2 inches that are being captured in the soil and not running off. So soil organic matter increases, water holding capacity and infiltration greatly increases, reducing soil erosion and other detrimental effects. All right, soil food web. This is for y'all's general information. We won't go into this too much. The soil microbiome, incredibly important. It's across all different genre of microbes, whether it's bacteria beneficial, viruses beneficial, fungal, and also individual single-celled organisms like amoeba, microarthropods, beneficial nematodes, and other organisms. Okay. Key component of cover crop understanding is the plant is related and linked to plant biodiversity. Again, simple concept of diversity above ground equals diversity below ground, which translates to a diverse rhizosphere. The more diverse plants you have, the different types and levels and concentrations and inputs that are coming in through plant root exudates, which is going to feed a much greater diverse soil microbiome. All right, so how do we do all those things to increase regenerative agriculture, soil health, and benefit all the processes, the symbiotic relationships that we need to have a highly functioning agroecosystem? All right, and so it's diversify crop rotations, utilize polycultures. So this is the example of polyculture. Anytime you add an extra plant to the mix, whether it's a cover crop or it's a primary crop, whether it's intercropping or vertical plant cropping, which you know was illustrated in the previous speaker's presentation, where you have multiple species of multiple crops going on at once. There was, I believe there was plantain, and then there was cacao, and then there was cover crop. That's a diverse system. That's an example of a polyculture. All right, now moving right into how do we do this, and let me see where we're at. I lost my, I didn't start it. Okay, so warm seasons, cover crops in the tropics have impose a complex array of management. I don't want to say concerns, but management opportunities and options that have to be taken into account. All right, I'm going to focus a lot on sun hemp, which is Crotalaria juncea, which is this crop here. And this is specifically tied to organic agriculture production, because in organic ag, we don't have the luxury of using herbicides as a termination method for our cover crops. Okay. Before I jump into that, I wanted to point out, that intercropping is a form of cover cropping. So cover crops can take different forms, whether they're in a perennial orchard situation or they're in a row crop situation. You can cover crop and intercrop and have a lot of overlapping that's going on. All right, so here we have cowpea that's intercropped in with maize, with corn. The cowpea can also be harvested. All right, it can be harvested for personal use and then turned around and left in place and chop and dropped to provide all kinds of wonderful green manure additions. All right. Again, we looked at the banana with the legume, but it doesn't have to just be a legume. There's benefits to all. We're under a lot of understanding, or I guess I shouldn't say that. We should say that we're led to believe that the only benefits to high nitrogen fixation are through legumes. And yes, the legumes have the capacity to do that, but a legume may not always be the best selection for your system. And especially with our tropical grasses, this is Pennisetum purpureum, or elephant grass, Napier grass. It's young at this stage and it's kept low. Everyone's like, oh, well, it'll get too big. Well, there's dwarf varieties of Napier grass, and if that Napier grass is also selectively harvested at opportune times, then it's not going to compete and it can be intercropped. So this is a perennial Napier grass with the banana. And tropical grasses, bunch grasses in particular, have great free associations with nitrogen fixing microbes. And so not just Rhizobium, which is the species that is associated with legumes, but there are many other species of microbes that work in association with other tropical plants that are non-leguminous to also provide nitrogen fixing capacity. All right, so I talked earlier about how do we diversify cropping systems and how do we work in our cover crops into a tight schedule. So I've been able to provide an example. There's no one rotation that is perfect for every farmer. Every farm has to develop their own rotation. This is just an example of a rotation I use on my farms and ones that I work. And I must add that, you know, longer rotations or yearly rotations or the duration of the rotation can have a huge impact on your soil health and your soil organic matter management practices to maximize soil organic matter, not just retention, but also increases in soil organic matter. All right. But the rotation is important because that's how we break our crop cycles. All right. And one crop will be a pest reservoir for one cover crop or one crop, whether it's a cover crop or a cash crop, may be a pest reservoir for certain pests and others will not. And so I wasn't even thinking of bringing this up, but you know, as I look at this picture, we have Lab here in the front, and then we have sun hemp, Crotalaria juncea, in the back. And you can see that we have quite a bit of pest damage in the front, where we have very little, and this is armyworm, if I'm not mistaken, and then we have no armyworm damage on our sun hemp. So this can be used as a trap crop. It can also be used during different times of the year, but knowing that this is a potential host for armyworm needs to be taken into account when we develop our rotations. So for example, I would not want to follow this cover crop up with a bean, with another legume that is also a host for armyworm, because sun hemp's a legume, but it's not a host for armyworm. Okay. So if I'm going to plant green beans or another type of bean after lab, I would have a high potential for a big pest outbreak or crossover from this cover crop into my subsequent cash crop. All right, so how do we optimize benefits of cover crop integration? And some things we've talked about: weed suppression, which is a huge one, and that's what this photo down here shows. Underneath the canopy of that's sunflower. You can see there's no weeds present, and in the tropics, weeds are one of the biggest banes of farmers' existence. All right, but also we have the potential, or we have the ability to greatly increase our beneficial insects. And I like this one here because I lived in St. Croix for 19 years, and you know, the giant centipede was everyone's greatest fear, especially working out or sleeping in the manner in which we slept. But that centipede is a tremendous predator, and that centipede is doing a lot as a beneficial insect. And that's actually in pigeon pea, and it was amazing. You'd watch these centipedes, and they would hang from the pigeon pea, and they would actually capture flying insects in the air. And it was a remarkable thing to see. But also our pollinators. Our pollinators are going to respond to our cover crops. So the cover crops have so many benefits, and we have to take them in a complete context of what those benefits are. So yes, it's soil health. Yes, it's biodiversity. Yes, it's weed suppression. Yes, it's water infiltration and increasing soil organic matter and increasing the hydrological functionality of the system. All right. This is the root, the main tap root of the sun hemp. And so you can see the association of the rhizobium nodules here with that. So many of us don't see that fixation capacity with the other plants because they're not stuck onto the root. They're just, for researchers for decades, they're like, oh, it doesn't even happen because we can't see them, but it is seeing them. It just happens to be that when you pull the root of the legume, there they are. All right. Okay. So cover crop benefits and risks. We've covered all these quite extensively, but I want to focus on some of the things we have to watch out for. And one of them is that a poor cover crop stand, in other words, poor cover crop establishment, and also, as was stated earlier, if you don't have the right level of seeding, and so we have a low seed rate, then we can have an encouragement of weed establishment. Okay, and then we've already mentioned that the cover crops can also be alternate hosts for pests. This can be used beneficially by the farmer as a trap crop, or it could be detrimental in that it attracts pests that could cause problems for subsequent or concurrent cash crops. Okay, when to terminate. This is something we haven't gone in detail over yet. Is that we can do an entire workshop on just cover crop termination management. I spent an easy 10 years working on how do we terminate our cover crop so that we don't lose soil organic matter, so that we don't damage the soil or the environment, and how do we do it organically without pesticides, without herbicide in particular. Okay. And after 10, 12 years more, and I'm still doing it, I'm still working on this because I use them on my farm. And how do I terminate without regrowth? And now I'm moving into the vegetable production cycle or component of where I'm talking. And so what it comes down to is senescence, lignification, and what I call a snappy stem. If you have a cover crop with a snappy stem, we can terminate it effectively without herbicide. If you don't have a snappy stem, we're going to have a difficult time terminating it. Why? Because there is no winter. There's no winter in Jamaica. We don't have a winter kill. There's no senescence due to that type of seasonal change. Okay, so if we don't have a seasonal change and we have a annual cover crop, but it can actually keep growing like a perennial, how do we kill it without doing full tillage? And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And that's where the snappy stem comes in. If it's cowpea or lab and it has a vining kind of rubbery stem, we're not going to be able to get the same kill, okay, unless we completely fully incorporate terminate it. All right. And so the termination method can become a hassle or a difficulty point if it isn't taken into account by the farmer in the farm production system. So here we go. This would be more lab, sun hemp, sorghum Sudan. Okay, we don't want to rule out our grass cover crops. Sorghum Sudan, millet are excellent cover crops. Okay, and there's others out there as well, but these are excellent cover crops also to keep in our cover crop toolbox. When do we terminate? Before we even get to the question of how we're going to terminate, when do we terminate? And so the basic rule of thumb is at 80% flower. All right, we want to terminate before anthesis or during anthesis, but prior to hard seed set. We don't want the seeds to mature in our cover crop because then they can become a future potential germinating weed in a subsequent vegetable crop. And we also don't want to lose all that nitrogen that's going to get converted from a vegetative state into a reproductive state when that plant goes through maturity. When that cover crop goes from flower to producing seed, that nitrogen in the plant tissue is going to plummet because it's redirecting it, it's reallocating it to the seed formation. Okay, so we want to terminate during the vegetative stage. Earlier is better than later, but timing it with that flowering and timing it before we have drops and significant losses of in green matter. So the nitrogen in the plant tissue, the green plant tissue, is where we want to keep it before it gets moved to the seed. Okay. And again, we have pigeon pea. Also, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. Oop, wrong one. There we go. All right. Now, one of the goals is synchronizing that nitrogen that's in the crop, in the cover crop, with the crop demand. All right. Now, this can be a tricky thing, especially in the tropics, because at the rate of decomposition is so high. And this is that mineralization process that takes place. All right. And so here we have cover crop, and this is under if we're incorporating it, but it also applies to if we're doing surface mulch. Here we have crop demand. And so that key point is when we have cover crop mineralization. The relationship is this: if it's less lignin, which means if it's less stiff, if there's less plant tissue structure, all right, so less lignin means less fiber, then it's going to decompose faster. The more fibrous, the tougher the plant, the longer it's going to take for those plant cell wall bonds to break down. And so the plant in the residue is going to hold on to that nitrogen longer. So lab, cowpea, those types of soft tissued legumes are going to mineralize and very quickly, often before your subsequent cash crop needs it. Whereas, especially if you break it up into small pieces, compared to leaving the plant whole and leaving it on the surface, which is going to delay and slow down the release process. And it's all about how long it takes the microbes, whether they're in the soil or on the soil, to break down that plant tissue, to mineralize and release that nitrogen that's being held in that plant tissue. So that's kind of the quick down and dirty of crop demand and release period. And it's tricky. It's a tricky one. So it's more about just constantly feeding those microbes opposed to trying to get this perfectly right every time, because there's so many factors that are involved in this process: weather, sun, rain, temperature, plant lignin or the carboniferous component of the plant, and on how you terminate it, stage of the plant. So this is something to keep in mind, but it can be overridden by other general management practices. Okay, so we can mow it. If we're terminating and we want to keep it on the surface, we can mow the cover crop. All right, we have to be careful with this process because some of the cover crops are viney. Some of the cover crops have fibers, which can bind up the rotary mower, for example. That mower may throw residue. It may leave an uneven distribution of the residue. We can also do this, of course, this is kind of the cut and drop method through hand cutting. So everything that we're doing and seeing that's done mechanically, we can also do by hand. All right, we can do full incorporation. Typically, if you have high residues like this, we're going to have to mow it and chop it up and let it rest. And that's one of the downfalls of full incorporation, is the amount of residue that we do. And that's what I refer to when I talk about high residue crops. When you get above 4,000 kilograms per hectare, you're in a high residue situation, and we have to manage it accordingly. And it is a labor intensive process to mechanically terminate it and get it fully incorporated. Okay. Yes, it can be done. And the system will work, but realize that every time we pass pass over our soil, we're, utilizing different aspects of more labor, more fuel, costs associated with that. And then also the biological implications of how much soil organic matter is lost due to tillage, because tillage and soil organic matter do not work positively together. As tillage increases, our soil organic matter is going to suffer, whether it's just through disking or through rototilling. All right, so surface sheet mulch. This is kind of the big one that I wanted to run through real quickly. We can do surface sheet mulch generation, which has a tremendous potential implication in sustainable vegetable production for many reasons. All right, and so this is what we call our roller crimper. The roller crimper, it can be done on a tractor, it can be done walk behind, it can be done with a board and ropes. There's ways to do it by hand on small acreage or garden-based level applications, or it can be done all the way on the highest level. It works well. When I said a snappy stem, it works really well on sun hemp. It works great on sunflower. It works effectively on pigeon pea. It does less, it'll roll it down flat on lab, but depending on the time of year and the rainfall, that's where we get this regrowth potential. So we have a higher regrowth potential in lab, and a lower regrowth potential in sun hemp and sunflower, for example. All right. Cover crop type and performance impacts on weed suppression. So we can see here, this is under sunflower, sun hemp, and pigeon pea, and it's all about canopy closure. This is where that plant density matters. Having high plant density is gonna decrease the infiltration of the sunlight and greatly reduce how much sunlight strikes the soil, and that's going to reduce our weed germination. I built this roller crimper out of materials that I was able to find locally, using a steel pipe, a 24-inch steel pipe, and an old disc. So I took a mold board style turning disc and turned it into a roller crimper and welded it up, and was able to produce our own roller crimper there in St. Croix. But like I said, it can also be done in other ways. All right, let me move forward. Some more pictures. And so after it's rolled, this is what we're looking at, creating that surface sheet mulch. And it all the benefits are the same as all the other mulch benefits, so I don't need to go into all those details. All right. And I'm going to skip that one. There we go. There are many different styles of roller crimpers, and you can all be researched online, and they can be used with recycled materials or recycled other agricultural implements. All right, this is a walk behind BCS tractor. That's not me, by the way. And I can also do it with 2x4s and a rope. And then this is transplanting. So now we're getting into how this applies to our vegetable crop production. And this can be done by hand, as I'll show you in a few subsequent pictures. This is on a one person. This is a highly technical, not many people are going to have access to this, but it can be built or developed in a more simplistic form behind a small tractor or another small vehicle. I've even seen it done behind two motorcycles together in Southeast Asia. So that's the tomato that's planted into the sun hemp residue. All right, I did quite a few years of vegetable research with this method in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and also in Florida with the University of Florida, and this has huge implications for Jamaica. I worked with 3, 4, 5 different hot pepper varieties, from jalapeno to habanero to Caribbean and Scotch bonnet. This system is ideal for growing peppers. The peppers just flourish under this system. So I won't go through all the aspects, but we compared, plastic mulch to hay mulch to full tillage to sun hemp residue mulch. I've done it with calabaza pumpkin, okra, watermelons, any crop is going to work. I've found that transplants typically do better, and when we're talking about heavy mulch, we're talking about 3 to 4 inches is kind of that standard that you need. You need a minimum of 3 to 4 inches of mulch, and that's going to flatten down. But I'm talking 3 to 4 inches of mulch when we terminate that cover crop, and that can be anywhere from 4,000 to upwards of 10, 12,000 kilograms per hectare. It'll work fine in that system. You can see here, I mean, an older tractor with a single line ripper can be adapted to speed up the process. And then going in with drip irrigation and planting on the drip holes is a highly effective method for this. All right, this is my real quick one. We're going to get back to the vegetable stuff, but I threw this in here to remind folks that sun hemp can be used also in mixed livestock production systems. You just got to be careful that you don't feed the wild variety, and know that there's different types of sun hemp, Crotalaria juncea, that have to be checked before you put livestock with them. All right. Okay, back to our jalapeno pepper production. So this is some of our other jalapeno peppers being transplanted. We transplanted 7 days after cover crop termination. In other applications, you can go in the same day as termination. It was mentioned earlier that sometimes the residue can harbor pests depending on the type of residue. The biggest pest problems that we found that we had to watch out for, depending on time of year, and also the vegetable that was being transplanted is cutworms. Cutworms were a particular tricky one at times. It wasn't unanimous. It didn't happen all the time, but in some of the residue, cutworms would be, protected in that residue. And so some preparations or anticipating potential cutworm problems is important. The other one that's interesting, of course, is it does create habitat for rodents. So we had to do mice and rat preventative measures and in that sense, and not always, but on certain farms, that high residue could offer that or harbor that protective component for rodents. And they didn't really cause a problem to the vegetables, but they would during the dry season. This was a dry season problem, cause problems, of course, with the rodents chewing into the drip irrigation lines for moisture. All right, so sunflower residue, sun hemp residue. These were two of our best ones. This is where I mentioned a biological process called allelopathy. And allelopathy is basically like it's a phytoherbicide. It's an organic plant-based herbicide. You can use this to benefit you, or it can actually cause you problems. So knowing if a cover crop has allelopathy or phyto just means plant, but plant herbicide capacity, which means that the residue or the growing plant can impede the growth, development, germination of other plants. Certain plants have allelopathy that are specific to only broadleafs or only grasses. So allelopathy is not something that is a problem across the board, but it's something that has to be taken into account for. So for example, allelopathy, sunflowers have allelopathy. They block the growth of a lot of grasses. They did not have a problem on jalapeno peppers, but doing some residue tests and checking and a little bit of research to know if there's any potential allelopathic crossover effects from a cover crop with high residue that you're going to continue to use in a vegetable production system is very important to note. All right, and the amount of production, and this is with no fertilizer, by the way. This is with zero inputs, and I mean zero inputs, no herbicides, no fertilizers, no pesticides of any kind, 100% organic production, and just absolute production like gangbusters. They just didn't quit. And this is in St. Croix during the dry season. And so we were able to extend our production with minimal drip irrigation because of the water saving, soil moisture retaining components of that surface sheet mulch. Get that one. This is super high residue, and I'll show you what we did with this. It was so much residue that we actually had to roll it in reverse and you hear that crackling is the snapping of that drying lignified stem of the sun hemp. And it's not 100%. There's a lot of Johnson grass in that too. And it's working on both the Johnson grass that came up as a weed with the sun hemp and also with the sun hemp itself. Okay. And then from that, we went directly into tomato. Well, I guess it was probably about 5 days later. We went in with larger tomato transplants so that the tomato transplants weren't lost in the thickness of that residue. So you can see that those tomato transplants, I believe, were around 4 to 5 weeks of age instead of 2 to 3 weeks of age. So slight modifications within your system may be necessary as a result of certain other variables or factors within your actual production regime, depending on the year and what you're dealing with. But we're going in with tomatoes. We're doing an alternating planting scheme and planting on either side on an alternating pattern of the drip line, so that one drip line feeds both sides of the transplant, or transplants on both sides of the drip line, I should say. All right, so the implications, indeterminate warm season cover crops in the tropics, those roller crimper termination, you're going to need one that's going to be able to be snapped or broken, so that you don't have high levels of regrowth. Can you use the others? Absolutely. Do the others have other implications in use in full tillage or in other management strategies? Absolutely. But generating your own mulch in place has some great possibilities for reducing weeds, and then all the other improved benefits of soil health. So that's that tie between cover crops and other subsequent vegetable crop systems. All right, and we've already kind of covered this as far as, yes, all the cover crops can also, whether they're perennial or annual, can be integrated into all of the other types of perennial horticultural crops, mango, avocado, banana, breadfruit, ackee, coffee, papaya, coconut, and the list goes on and on. On the right, that's a friend of mine and farmer in Puerto Rico, Dumed Colon. His specialty was in plantains. He adopted cover crops, not just sun hemp, but of course cannavelia and mucuna. And he was able to, as a commercial farmer, he went organic and after transition, and then he was able to reduce fungicide use in his first year by 78%. And then he reduced nematicide use by 50%, and then he went to full and complete removal. So during that transition period from 1 to 3 years, he went from a complete reliance on fungicides, nematicides, and herbicides to no use at all, no reliance on it whatsoever. All right, last one. There's all kinds of opportunities around every corner. We're like, well, we don't have the seeds, or seed availability is difficult, or how do I establish it? So in my travels through the Caribbean, I kept noticing and seeing this plant growing under full shade in the forests. And I'm like, and it was growing on rocks and boulders and also walls of people's homes. It turned out to be called Calesia. And that Calesia is a surface running stoloniferous tropical plant that stays low to the ground and is incredibly fast in establishing and provides all kinds of great benefits. The Arachis pentoi, the perennial peanut, yes, it's wonderful and it is a great job. But this Calesia is drought resistant. It's easy to establish, and it's locally available. So this is just to indicate and show that not all cover crops have to be the same cover crops that have been, pushed as far as just the legumes or just the stuff that is a traditional approach to cover crops. There's alternatives out there, and there's ways to utilize those alternatives that are already adapted, ecotypes adapted, that could be highly beneficial to the system. And you're talking about reducing weed pressure, and your soil moisture goes up, and all kinds of benefits. So weed suppression, soil moisture, soil health, biodiversity are all enhanced. All right. And so you can see that we went from a plantain transplant stage, and we just took pieces, just cuttings, vegetative cuttings of the calicia, and just put it around the base of each. And then within 3 to 4 months, and this was key to it, was doing it before the rainy season, no irrigation, it's self-established, and we were in this situation within a 4 to 5 month period. So mechanical weeding on the left, our farmers were weed eating almost weekly, and then the living mulch on the right, you eliminate that completely with all the other benefits as well. All right, and then this is just a backup for we did the same stuff type of work with watermelons and other mulches. I know that the sargassum has been a huge problem with a lot of Caribbean islands. I know for St. Croix in particular. But this is a background on utilizing other mulches like wood chips. This research was done directly following Hurricane Maria in St. Croix, which devastated the island similar to the west end of Jamaica. And we utilized to get back on our feet, and how do we utilize all of the vegetative woody debris material into an agricultural setting. This is that wood mulch system, and growing, in this case, I targeted watermelons, and we did watermelons in wood mulch debris, or wood mulch debris from the massive amounts of vegetative debris that was a result of Hurricane Maria. And then of course the sargassum, and this information goes into more detail on how our approach and management of those resources went to benefit the farmers. All right, that was a lot. I know that I probably went over in time, but I went through that as quick as possible. But there'll be time for questions, and hopefully I can answer anyone's answer any questions or concerns about the material presented. But thank you guys so much for your time.
That was another excellent presentation. Absolutely amazing. I don't know, we need an entire seminar or webinar just for the questions I know that many people will have to ask. Thank you so very much for that wonderful presentation, and sharpen yourselves now, put the questions in, because these presentations have been amazing. I think Nicola, Shirley Phillips, you're going to have to, as you're so rightly pointing out, include them in your podcast, because all of this material that has been presented today and which is still to come, we are going to have to get it in a way that we can all benefit from it over time. We have to take it a little bit at a time and then learn from it. All right, so we're moving quickly into our next presentation from Kingsley Carter, who began his full-time journey into farming in 2007 with a lease of 6 acres in Bernard Lodge, St. Catherine. He transitioned to permaculture and organic farming in late 2013, desire to farm more sustainably. In 2022, he was relocated to Salt Pond in St. Catherine, and here he continues to incorporate the bio-integrated model on his farm, planting cash crops, cover crops, herbs for pest control, forest trees, and fruit trees. He's an avid reader and researcher and loves to experiment with making natural fertilizers and pesticides. Ladies and gentlemen, Kingsley Carter.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And let me first say thanks to the organizers for this seminar, and to all my other panelists who have presented so far, who have done an excellent job, which is going to make my presentation a whole lot easier. So let me first begin as a Jamaican, and based on everything that is happening right now. how I came into the whole idea of cover crops was because I was on the other spectrum of farming, using synthetics and herbicides, and it was a bit of a challenge for me, and the expense, it was really costly. And at the same time, I recognized that I wasn't having any improvements in the soil, and I keep adding more weeds, with each level of treatment that I would use. And so I would have to be going in almost on a bi-weekly basis, trying to get rid of the weeds. And as I transitioned into to organic and so forth, I realized that there was this thing called cover crops, and it was a better means for me to control the weeds. And for anybody who knows Bernard Lodge, but if you don't know Bernard Lodge, Bernard Lodge has a very high weed bank. And what does that mean? It means that as long as you get just a few drops of water on the soil, you're going to have weeds. And for me, anytime it rain, uh, the weeds would be like within 2 weeks. I'm looking at weeds, like grass is like about up to about 3 feet high, and leading from that, so that started my journey in cover crop, and also as a means of fertilize getting nitrogen into the soil. So one of the crop I looked at, and as some of the crops I look at, so on your screen right now you are seeing, as Stuart and others that would have mentioned earlier, Sudan grass, and this was extremely important for me as it not only fixed nitrogen in the soil, but it was also a very high biomass. And it is said that in the Bernard Lodge area, and you can classify it as the part of the Greater Portmore area, it is said that on island we receive the least amount of rainfall. And so I had to do something that could preserve the level of moisture in the soil. So I needed plants that were high in biomass, and these are some of the plants. So the Sudan grass offered an excellent biomass for me. And what it also did is also that it also helped to attract a lot of beneficial insects, right, predatory insects. And it was also used as a means of me telling whether or not I had like a pest problem, because it was a great attraction also for insects like the aphids from my main crops. So at the time of it starting to blossom, it puts out what we call a honeydew that the aphids love, and the predators like the ladybugs and so forth. You'll see them a lot on it, feeding on all these aphids and other things. And I had a lot of praying mantis and so forth there. And if you could go to the next slide for me. So the other thing we would have brought in back then would have been the sun hemp that you're looking at here, and that was excellent for my sweet peppers, because uh, not only that it provided a high biomass in terms of preserving moisture, but it also provided a great deal of shade from the sun. The challenge I had was that I was also growing cowpeas alongside the Sudan grass around at the lower ends of the sweet peppers. But the challenge with that was every time I had to walk through the cowpeas, I would do damage to it. So one of the other cover crop that I had brought in, and I'm basically talking about these cover crop because these are cover crop that I would have had experience with when I was at Bernard Lodge off Grange Lane. So we would have used things like I would have gotten a recommendation from when I was because I did this and started going to source and had a consultant, Jeremiah Kidd, who came and visit the farm. So he recommended to me that instead of using the cowpeas around the sweet pepper, which also attracted pests, as you would hear some of the previous presenters talk about, like armyworms, he recommended that I use white clover. And white clover was very good because it works almost like a grass that you could walk on. You wouldn't do any much damage to it, and it also fixes nitrogen in the soil. And we had a lot of microbial activities taking place, so the plants were doing well and everything. You got good yield. And I have found, as our previous presenter that said, it costs me less in terms of pesticides and so forth. At one point, especially where sweepers were concerned, I remember there was an incident where, and this after couple practicing of this, that in the latter part of it, when I had put in a crop of sea pepper, the only time I had to do any treatment was at the beginning. And I realized that for the rest of the lifespan of the sweet pepper, going right up to harvest, right, I didn't have to do any intervention in terms of pest control, and those things. So, these cover crops, work beautifully for me. And if you could go to the next slide. So, those were the Bernard Dodge cover crops. What I am doing presently right now is that we are utilizing this particular cowpeas. It's a different variety of cowpeas than we are used to. This one is called the Ace cowpeas. We just got this recently since year, and it is an excellent biomass based on my experience to the different type of cowpeas that we had on island locally. And I'm so grateful because when I made the transition to this new location in Salt Pond, you know, um, getting cowpeas, our local cowpeas, was a challenge. I basically got I could just basically scrape like a handful from a few individuals, you know, and the multiplication rate wasn't that great. But I got these recently, and what I love about them, unlike the other cowpeas that runs like a vine, like this particular cowpeas, it actually grows up into like a canopy, like, and then it just starts to just spread it way after it reach like about 3 feet in height, and just cover the entire space. um there is a late in the coming months ahead, I would like to share, going forward as we share this journey, the experience of this. And for the family, the Genesis family, all those different sites that I've been going to, I've been sharing the different stages of this particular cowpeas, and the fast growth of it. And it's a much faster growing cowpeas than our local cowpeas, which you probably have to wait near to about 3 months. This one, it takes about roughly about 2 months to a week before it starts seeding. But you'll have all this beautiful canopy covering the ground and everything. And I had to destroy a larger plot of this, because after we came into the rainy season much earlier, and it started to attract a lot of armyworms. So, and it wasn't doing well at this stage because cowpeas, at least the varieties that I know of, they don't like wet conditions. So it wasn't doing well after a while, and so we had to get rid of it by just tilling it back into the soil. but I can say right now, this particular area that you are looking at after the hurricane and everything, you know, you would have thought to yourself that having till it back into the soil before the hurricane, that you would have seen a lot of weeds or grass growing in it. And what I did was I planted scotch bonnet peppers just about 2 weeks before the hurricane in this particular section here, and I can say, based on everything, I haven't lost any of those Scotch bonnet peppers, and they are looking really good right now. They are about at least a foot and a half in height. They are actually blossoming right now, and we don't even use any type of nitrogen fertilizer on organic fertilizers on them. It's just basically what the cowpeas would have provided to the soil and the nutrients. And the soil, I can say, is looking a whole lot better than it was before. And I just like the journey of the cowpeas and the different cover crops. And in the past we would have used also some of our local crops like marigolds, to help control nematodes in the soil. One of the things that was told to me that the Bernard Lodge lands on a whole is susceptible, and I've proven that in the past to nematode problem, root knot nematodes. So we have to do as an organic farmer. We have to do what we need to do to control those. So some of the things that I would have done is that I would have planted, like, just in the very way that you are seeing the cowpeas, we have planted out a whole host of marigold. If we intend to plant things like plantains and bananas in those areas. So, and currently we don't have the supplies like I used to could have planted where I was at Bernard Lodge. I always had like a backup of marigolds and so forth, and different varieties of marigolds too. Because I like the attraction of the flowers that attracts the various different beneficial insects. And if you have a good cover crop, one of the things I recognize with cowpeas, they attract a lot of ladybugs, and especially at the time of blossoming, they attract a lot of beneficial wasps. At one point I could count at least about five different varieties of wasps, and it helped in the reduction of your pest intervention. So it's good, and I would recommend that most of our farmers, and I'm doing this right now to show, especially to the farmers in the Bernard Lodge area, and those that are interested, to show that this really does work. I note one of the questions earlier in one of somebody was making a comment. How do you establish a cover crop? Because I've been watching all these nice pretty cover crops stories online, and at first when I started, I thought it was just a simple matter of just getting the seeds and just planting them, alongside. But I realized that you had to do some soil preparation first, and then you actually put in these cover crops, and then they will just grow and do the rest. So soil preparation is one of the first things that you need to do, and think about it and practice crop rotation. As previous speakers would have mentioned, you need to know the soil conditions that you have. So, I recommend to every farmer online, and even if you're not a farmer, you're just a backyard gardener, do a soil test so you know what exactly is in your soil, and you can align the particular cover crop that you need for that soil and things. So, you know that has been my journey, and I like that I'm not remembering the name right now of my colleague earlier who talked about the grass, because one of the things that most people, when they come to the location now, they would see like a lot of guinea grass growing in the field areas that we were not planting anything right now. And they said, boy, all this person is growing is grass. But I found over the years that these grasses are good resource, and as long as you can keep them before you can cut them back before they start seeding, they are good mulching material. And I found where, especially where I've planted some plantings, I've used them alongside the planting to help keep back the moisture in the soil. And when you look at that particular area of the soil where whenever meet you go and you cut it back and so forth, you have like a buildup of about 3 inches of mulch. And when you dig under, you see all sorts of different beneficial insect. I took note of Stuart talking about the centipede, and oftentimes it's a big feature on the farm, in the soil, so it helps a lot with certain pests that you may have problem with, armyworms and various different types of moths and so forth that would affect your different crops. So right now we are looking at expanding the field here, and we are just waiting to come out of the rainy season. So we are looking to start preparing lands for January to start the process of planting this cowpeas again, and so that we can have seeds also for distribution in the future. And we are looking forward to getting a whole lot more. In the past, it would have been easier to get the things like the sun hemp and the Sudan grass, and one of my favorites is the sun hemp and the white clover. So we're hoping as we go forward that we'll be able to get these different varieties of cover crops. And it is good, to have the variety. So, you know, as you move from one season, you can plant another crop that is suitable for the rainy season. So this cowpeas is ideally for dry season, which is one of the reasons I loved it. Didn't take much watering. Probably in the early stages, we would water like about once or two times for the first 2 weeks of the seeding process. And after it germinated, it was like just one time a week. And after about 3 weeks, then it would be like once every 2 weeks. And at this stage, it was like the last time before it reached this stage would have been 3 weeks of waiting. So that is, and these are on like a single drip line for every row that you're looking at. It's just a single drip line. So they did well, and I have tried using sprinklers. So sprinklers also give you a good job, but the drip line give you a better growth and everything. So that is my from a local perspective experience with the cover crop. And I can basically say that everything that the previous presenters have said before proved true. The only thing I have not yet tried, we're working on that for the future, is to see how we can get a crimper for our walk behind tractor to do the crimping process, and so that we can plant straight into the mulch that we would have created from these cover crops, instead of tilling it back into the soil. But that's it from me, Kingsley Carter, and thank you all, and thank you, and I hope uh, this will have been a blessing to you all, and that you continue to do your best as we try to recoup from Melissa. And you know, best of blessing to all my farmers out there as you push forward. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. And I'm very happy that you have this kind of information available to you from your own experiences that you can share with others. And we're very happy that you're sharing it with us as well here on the webinar this morning. Now, we have quite a number of questions already. I know that I have a ton, but I don't want to start with mine. I want to start with a number of the questions that have been coming in from those of you who are on the platform. If you have not yet dropped your question in, you need to do so now, right? So we need to ensure that we're maximizing the time. And let me just do a quick time check-in. We should be finishing at 12 o'clock, but clearly we might go a few minutes over that. I will yield to the advice from the others as to how much further we can go. But let us just jump right into the questions, because we want to ensure that each individual who asks a question, you get an answer. Leroy Wilson says, how does one start to rid the land of the weed to establish the cover crop, and how does one get access to the respective cover crop seeds, given that I get that this is a challenge in itself? Not sure which one of the presenters would want to take that one, since you all in varying degrees covered the whole issue of how to use cover crops. Perhaps one of the or two earlier presenters who I know have a time challenge would want to take that one.
Well, and Kingsley, it may be beneficial. Kingsley, how did you best establish your cover crops? I know you went into it a little bit, but directed at this question, what was your most effective method of establishing your cover crop?
Well, my most effective method was to first till the particular area that I was going to be planting. So after I've tilled that particular area, and let me say, for the cowpeas that you're looking at, the picture of the cowpeas that you're looking at earlier, it's the length of that row is 120 feet long, and it's 2 feet wide. And it took at least a pound of that particular variety of cowpeas to plant out that 6 rows that you are looking at, right? So I tilled that, and then we planted that cowpeas in the first stages of it, right? To the side as it is germinated, you will have a few weeds that would want to come up, but as you do that first weeding, right, it is good for the rest of the growing season, and it just grows and it just spreads and it covers. And as you continue, my previous things over the years, as you continue to plant and do your crop rotations, right, weeds are going to be less of a challenge, and it's going to be a whole lot easier to establish. But one of the things I would encourage most persons who want to do this is not if you don't have the resources, don't try to do a whole big area one time. Start out small. So if you want to start out like with a 1 acre, based on the resource that you have, you start out with that 1 acre, and then as you establish that 1 acre, right, and you get what you want, then you start to spread. You can spread the rest of the way.
Yeah. I want to bring Mr. Guerin in, because I know that you have to go. I just want to touch a little bit on the whole issue of the status generally of regenerative agriculture globally. And given what we're seeing now with climate change, how important is the whole issue of the use of cover crops as we pursue regenerative agriculture?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. And greetings and blessings, everybody. I think regenerative agriculture is gaining attention worldwide. And as a set of practices, as Dr. Weiss has said, building upon organic agriculture and, focusing on building soil health and restoring degraded landscapes and whether that's increasing biodiversity and or improving ecological resilience, in farming systems. And, I think the core principles that he went over were, when they were looking at soil health, keeping the soil covered, minimizing disturbance, maintaining living roots, as we learned in our first presentation, and increasing biodiversity and integrating different components, whether it's livestock or especially cover crops, I think are, help us to reduce the need for synthetic inputs, reducing our costs in the long run for the farmer. And I think with these principles, it helps kind of deliver an economic and environmental and a social benefit, across various scales and different geographies globally, but also in Jamaica with the different, whether you're on the east or the west, in the mountains or down in somewhere in St. Elizabeth, right? So I think despite different growing interests in different types of farming, regenerative practices still, they're not mainstream globally. And I think it's estimates from what I have read is only a small percentage of global farmland, has really adopted these methods. And the adoption is expanding though gradually. And, there's a lot of focus on regenerative agriculture. But again, there are barriers like economic constraints, when a farmer's worried about, subsistence farming, and that can be a barrier, or technical challenges, mechanical challenges, lack of incentives, lack of availability of seed and ability to do these things. So some of it will come from innovation and observation of your local surroundings and utilizing keystone species that might be there that you may not recognize or realize. And then at the same times, governments, nonprofits, and even places like UE, like research institutions, they and even private sector companies and things like this can, all kind of come together and invest in regenerative approaches. So it's like a multifaceted approach from various people with investment into this, including the farmers, and whether that's cover cropping, reducing your tillage, and diversifying your rotations. It's all part of this kind of this idea of being more climate smart and being able to build resilience on your farm. So when you do have disasters, you're able to bounce back, I guess, more effectively. So, soil conservation is at the heart of that. And I think that's why it's important.
All right. Thank you so very much for that. Colleen Williams has a question here, which I think is directed at Mr. Wally. Can you expand on the use of cover crops in the production of economic crops like coffee, cacao, bananas, and plantains?
Yes, I think it's finding a useful one, cover crop that is very useful. In certain areas, we can grow Arachis pintoi. I know there was a question about that. There is another Arachis called Arachis perenne. There are different crops, and pinto is a different bean altogether. But the growing of crops, the cover crops in those conditions, requires a very special selection. Early coffee plantations, sometimes you can grow Canavalia with them because it is not an aggressive plant. It will generally stay put. But once you get to about the second year, you will have to find another cover crop. And usually that Arachis, where you have moisture. Where you have moisture is very good. Where there is no moisture, it is tough. It is very hard to establish. Some of the other crops that were mentioned were cacao. Same thing. When I showed one of the pictures, they showed some cacao. Generally, you need a decent stand of cacao to make a little bit of money. I'm sorry to say that, but people will need to have some plants in a almost a pure stand or intercropped with another crop. And that's where the selection comes in, is very important. Stacy mentioned the tool from Echo. That is very amenable to that for choosing the correct cover crop in those areas. Now, for coffee, others, you may be able to get one or two in the early establishment. You'll be able to get a suitable cover crop started. With the bananas and plantains, again, you will have to watch out because very quickly crops like Makuna will take over, and a small farmer or another type of farmer, that can get out of hand very quickly. So they don't have some of the good plantain varieties, and that's very important. I should mention the good plantain varieties that are resistant to the Fusarium race 4 and some of the other problems, those need to be applied as well for getting. Also, what was the other crop mentioned? I think it was bananas and plantain. But you have to choose very carefully. And for sometimes people can apply one or two specific cover crops for those areas, but again, they are made for coffee. They are ones that do well in coffee in Central America. The Caribbean is a different story, I'm sure. There's probably more. So I think that Stuart touched on some of the other cover crops that are used, different crotolarias. And I think those ones would be good to consider. But also the stage in which you're planting them. That's very important. The Arachis pintoi is good, but very limited. Some of the others, you can respond with a cover crop, but you will quickly have to eliminate that because it'll get in the way of some of the other operations for agriculture.
Thank you so very much for that, Robert Wally. Mr. Eudoxie, I want to bring you in because I know that you've all been engaged in a significant amount of research. I know that here in the Caribbean region and in the Latin American region, for many years, we've added excess amounts of nitrogen to our soils, and that is posing a risk to soil and water quality. And I wonder how it is that we lead a turnaround of that while at the same time embracing the whole issue of using cover crops. It's almost as if in Jamaica we have a term where we say we have to ride and whistle. We're going to have to do both. How do we do that?
Thanks so very much. And I think I want to start by indicating that we have had good evidence. Stuart would have presented it as well as to how cover crops can be incorporated. So I wanna start by saying one of the things we have done. I have worked, I guess, probably as long as probably Stuart would have worked on cover crops, I would have worked on using organic amendments into our soils. And I could tell our audience without a shadow of a doubt that alone is insufficient in improving soil health and in sustaining, the health of our soils, particularly if we're thinking about, as Andrew mentioned, regenerative agriculture and other types of sustainable production systems, organic systems. The introduction of organic matter is a very similar kind of philosophy when you think about how people add inorganic fertilizer, and sometimes that is where the problem arises. So because it's seen as a input that will provide fertility, the more we add, the better we believe it's going to be. And that's where sometimes we get into the problem whereby we don't realize that even organic amendments are very similar to our inorganic amendments in the potential for environmental contamination. So we do have to bear that in mind. And I think the way to get around that is to understand as well the nature of the amendments that we are applying. How are those amendments used within the system to ensure that we get productivity, but at the same time minimize pollution and build the resilience that we're looking for. But these amendments must be incorporated or must be associated with cropping system changes or cropping system solutions as well. And I think that is where probably cover crops have a huge role to play in terms of our soils and their resilience and their overall health improvement. I think that is one of the missing pieces within our tropical environment that would have seen over years that we cannot necessarily build organic matter content in our soils, even if we're adding these amendments. And that is one of the reasons why we're getting the pollution, because the amendment is not staying where we want it to stay and giving us that long-term benefit of improving the health. But the amendment on its own under our rainfall and temperature is not sufficient by itself. And I think by using a combination and thinking about the agronomy and the system is where we need to go. So I think very much so that the two of them are additive, and having cover crops that can not only serve as mulch, which is serving as organic matter, but that could also be incorporated as part of a system where we utilize the organic matter from cover crops in a manner to build our soil health, I think is one of the approaches that has significant implications for our productivity and, importantly, and I want to stress on that a lot, our resilience to things like erosion. And I think Stuart showed some very good slides around that, because we are prone to intense rainfalls in the region. And we also have to recognize that if we don't build the soil health to resist these events, that we are going to be on a road of degradation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much. And that actually leads me to my next question, which is a very important one. One that was sent in from Colleen Williams. What can be done to reduce the pest load that typically follows events like Hurricane Melissa in a sustainable way that doesn't further degrade our soil health? When we look at what we are told is hurricane burn, the fact that there is more salination as a result of the hurricane, the proliferation of pests, it really is posing a challenge for our farmers. And I don't know which one of you want to tackle that, but it is a very important question.
Well, I'll start and I'll get everyone else's input too, but there's going to be a flux, and that flux is going to be that surge that you're talking about. Because of what we call that salt burn, and used to, we only thought that happened on the coast, but we now know that, when the hurricanes pick up the salt water, that there's salt burn across the whole island, or wide ranging. Mm-hmm. So you have to remember that when that's happened, that's basically a full defoliation impact event. So we've defoliated the natural vegetation, and now those pests are going to be in a survival situation where they're going to reproduce quickly, and they're going to look for new food sources. And those new food sources aren't going to be necessarily their traditional food sources. They're going to be concentrated in the regrowth or the crop. And so that concentration is going to create that surge of pests, because you went from a large area with lots of vegetation that could absorb a lot of pests to a small area that does not have has less capacity to absorb that level of pests. Plus, the pests are in a survival situation also. They're trying to make the most of this opportunity. And then if we have a monocropping scenario, then that monocrop is going to again concentrate those pests into one place. All right, so expecting that surge and knowing that it's coming is a big part of it. How do we tackle that? And we can provide alternative host crops for that in the form of buffers and peripheral areas that are gonna intercept those pests before they make it to our primary. So I might design a field in these aftermath periods where I use because we know cowpea is going to attract pests, and pests love those particular soft, less lignified legumes. I'm going to hopefully set up a intercept zone, which is our trap crop, and then I can use that trap crop to terminate or kill those pests, or to prevent them from getting into my cash crop. In the same way, intercropping, so we can provide alternative host vegetation, and the cover crop can serve that to protect our other crops. And then another one is additional predator habitat. So we've lost, just like we lost food sources for the pests, we've also lost habitat for our beneficial insects. So our beneficial insects have taken a huge hit. All right, whether they're pollinators or actual predators, we can go out and facilitate more habitat for those pests, or for those predators that are going to be beneficial. We can release those insects, we can order those in, they can be brought in from off island, they can be supported through cooperatives, so we can release more predators. So using that IPM management tool of beneficial pest management is a great way to do that. And if we don't bring them in, we can create habitat and plant other species now that'll be the home location for those beneficial insects. That's two. There's other ways with rotating crops that is also key, and now's the time to select your crop based on resistance to pests. So if there was never an opportunity or a reason to select for pest resistance, now's the time to do that. So selecting varieties for pest resistance is tremendous. So when you select your seeds, look for the varieties that have already been selected for pathogen and pest resistance in particular. So those are three big ones, and I know Andrew and the others have some other techniques that want to add. So I'll turn it over to them to put their input in.
All right, Andrew, I'm going to allow you to go because I know that time is against you. So your final comments for us.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Weiss, and thank you, Althea. I think we have to look at like how cover crops recover as well, and not just like the insects and getting rid of insects, but think about it's going to probably be more slowly, and we want to help them recover evenly. So like kind of try to protect your soil, keep your roots active, and avoid heavy nitrogen inputs early on, so you can that regrowth isn't so overly lush and attractive to the pest. And second, I would manage the field environment, so keeping airflow moving. So sometimes if we are switching over to cover crops, or we have a lot of residue on the land, moisture can get trapped in there, and the humidity can then become issue with harboring pests and become like homes for them. So we want to avoid conditions that favor rapid pest buildup, and allowing that airflow in there can help reduce the pest pressure. And then the third thing that comes to mind is increasing the diversity where you can, which is adding in the cover crops, and that can be interplanting. The buffer area was a great point that can kind of give pests an alternative to go to, as well as house beneficial insects will help reduce the pest pressure. And flowers are also a great way to bring in beneficials too. And I think it kind of, echoing Stuart, reducing the monocrop fields if possible. And then they really don't have anywhere else to go. So the pressure, when we have a monoculture, the pressure intensifies when they don't have anywhere to go. So, I think at this point, like targeted organic controls would probably be cumbersome or hard to implement, but they work, could be a short-term tool, but soil health and balanced regrowth, I think, would be the first things to look at. And that diversity can help bring the pest populations back into check.
All right. Thank you so very much, Andrew. If we don't see you, if we see you dropping off, that's because you have to go. Thank
Yeah.
you so very much. Your presentations are always amazing and always a pleasure to work with you on these kinds of events and activities. All right,
Yes.
Kingsley, your experience, because from a local standpoint, you have been doing quite a bit of work. How do you normally handle the whole issue of pests? I'm not hearing Kingsley.
Sorry about that.
Right. That's all
Yes.
right.
One of the things I noticed about 2 weeks after Melissa was, especially in my farm belt area, though we didn't suffer as much as the people on the west, but one of the things I recognize is that we had a lot of army worms that while I was driving on the road, you could see like the whole road of the farm belt was just covered in army worms, just moving from one field to the other. And for the peppers that I had, I noticed that we had some armyworms issue taking place there, but not as significant as what my other colleagues would have suffered because one of the things, as I said, we had these guinea grass growing right around the field, and the pepper bed was like right in the center of it. So one of the things I had to do to bring the level of control that was in the field was that we had to go in with some organic pest control material in terms of spraying like neem, and so forth. And for the first week, because I was away in Westmoreland helping, so I came back to see this, and one of the attractions for the armyworms also was my color field. So I had to kill out the color field, right? And start now treating the peppers. Like the first week, I had to be spraying like with the neem at least 2 times. Spray neem this the Monday, and then use diet pill that had BT in it to control them. And then after that, basically like 1 week after, once a week. And the other thing I had to do was to make sure that the rows between the peppers were clean. And I did like a buffer around the field. So we cleared like about 10 feet space around from the pepper field and allow the grass to continue to grow. So what happened is that the grass is not really their main food source, but they would actually stay in the grass, eat what they could eat in the grass, right? And allow also for the beneficial insects to come in because we had flowers that made it through. So we had our flowers attracting our ladybugs. I had a field of sweet potato, which would have been like about from the pepper field, about 150 feet away from the pepper field. So they also help as a big investment in terms of the amount of beneficial. Because I pass through that pepper potato field, I would see a lot of ladybugs, a lot of praying mantis, and so forth. And eventually, those guys move from the sweet potato into the area where my peppers are. So I'm seeing a lot of wasps, I'm seeing a lot of praying mantis, I'm seeing a lot of ladybugs. So right now, so after my intervention of spraying, it would have taken me about uh, 3 weeks to bring that level of infestation down with all the other things that I said I did. And presently, when I went to the farm last week, right, we didn't have to be doing anything. We saw the beneficial insects there and so forth. And one of the things the only thing I'm doing right now is making sure that I'm adding some compost tea to add nutrients to keep those plants in the best of health so that they can also build up their own defense mechanism against the pests. So that is what I've been doing and seeing it work so far. And later on into next week, as we get the time, is that we want to go through now and start to planting some more herbs, like some French thymes and some other herbs that are along the border of these crops to make sure that we have that preventative background, so we don't have any other thing come in place, So that's what we're doing, and just keep up the organic treatments. Yeah.
So that,
Thank you so very
if I
much
could
for
add,
that, Kingsley. Go
yeah,
right ahead.
that is an ideal approach management scheme plan. And so I just wanted to point out real quick that it was through constant vigilant monitoring that Kingsley was able to identify that the pests were in the guinea grass as a vegetative buffer, and the beneficial were in the sweet potato. So when I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, you sprayed or you treated the vegetative buffer, you were able to treat the pests, whereas you did not treat and you promoted the movement of the beneficials from the sweet potato, because that's where the beneficial insects were. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I didn't spray the sweet
See?
potatoes.
So by doing that, he optimized his beneficials and was a vigilant farmer to know where the beneficials were versus the pests, and he used both techniques perfectly in order to do that. And then the other thing was, he didn't just rely on one management organic pesticide. He used neem, he used dipel, and so because it was a high pressure, the original question was, what can we do now? And it's to diversify. So he diversified his management practices, but he also diversified his treatment. And so he applied multiple treatments with different products so that he would get a wider range and longer lasting impact of his efforts. So he was using multiple organic approaches through the organic pesticides, and you can even add to that. So you can use dipel, you can use the neem, and then you can use the safer soap or the horticultural soap. You can use other botanicals. You can blend and put those together so that you have a much greater impact against a wider range and higher pest population of insects, but only if you monitor it and you know where those are located. So that's perfect.
And if I could add to, I forgot to say that one of the things that we've been going around training is the use of EM and also EM5. So I've been also been using EM5. So EM5 is a combination of EM1 activated mixed with other herbs. So I would have had this before the hurricane. So we'd have mixed various different herbs in that to create that treatment also.
Right. I'm going to ask Dr. Eudoxie and Mr. Wally to comment as well. Dr. Eudoxie, the protocols that are being followed here, are they similar across the region?
For organic treatments, yes, they are. Even actually in commercial farming, the BTs are very effective. Pathogenic microorganism. So we know that, and it works very well. So dipel is one of those well-known and well-used insecticides, as well as neem. So we have done some work as well, even research work on the insecticidal as well as fungicidal effects of neem, and actually neem compost. So I'm happy to hear Kingsley was using some compost tea, because we were also able to show that if you do bring in the compost tea from neem and have neem included in your compost when you're making it, we were able to show that some of the active ingredients, some of the nimbacidin, the azadirachtin, that finds its way into the compost, particularly if you're using vermicompost, so you don't get the elevated temperatures. You do get some of those remaining, and we were able to show that they do have particular effect on not only insects, but as well, as I said, we tested them on Phytophthora, and we did see some beneficial effect as well in controlling that particular umycete. So we do know that those are very good strategies, but I think I want to also recognize that what was done was not necessarily a single type of approach, but what was done, and I think what was highlighted again by Stuart, was the fact that what was important in the process was the monitoring. And I think that is where at times, when we think about how we address crop performance, particularly when it comes to pest pressures, that we don't have sufficient monitoring being done. So if we are able as well to recognize from a very early stage what is happening rather than when the pest pressure is very high, there's an opportunity to address that, particularly through, I guess, probably softer type approaches in terms of what we do. So yes, it is an approach that I have to admit is gaining traction. Commercially, I guess most of our farmers still who are not organic still rely heavily on some of our chemical-based approaches, but you find more and more that farmers are recognizing. I have to admit, and I have to inform you all that, for instance, we did through a very long and tedious process here, develop a bio-pesticide that even from some of our regional commercial suppliers, because we're going to have it on the market. It's in the market in Trinidad, but we are making some progress with having some of our regional input suppliers supply it as well. They would have tested it. And in testing it, they realized that it was as good or even better than some of the existing products. So what I'm saying is that I'm really appreciative of the fact that what we have is persons who are willing to recognize that inherently there are approaches that are just as good, but we do have to make sure that we do the monitoring and we do the experimentation to verify that these approaches are effective at a commercial level.
Right. And the final
And
comment on this particular issue from Mr. Wally. Yes, Mr. Wally.
remember too that in addition, some pests are transient. They're migratory. For example, the fall armyworm is a Spodoptera. It's very, very mobile. So sometimes pest control isn't as effective for those pests, and the pest that we're controlling is another one that's opportunistic that just finds that particular field. But I think that the approach, the analysis and the approach are very good, because integrated pest management in all practices is going to come down to a couple of things that are key. Number one is always being able to identify the specific pest that you have.
All right. Thank you also very much for that. It is clear to me, Nicola, and the rest of the team, Ms. Dehaney, that we're going to have to do an entire forum focused on pests alone, because it is a hot button topic, particularly at this time when we have had these real challenges as a result of Hurricane Melissa. Colleen Williams asking, if you can't get access to soil tests, are there other things that we can use or do to determine the health of our soil?
So if I may quickly jump in,
Sure.
There are observations that farmers could make. It's still wise to seek out that soil test, because it does give you some characteristics that we cannot observe. But what we can do is pay attention to the biology in our soils, things that we can see, and we can also see, and I think you saw that from, I think, all three of our presenters that are remaining here was able to show under certain systems how our plants behave. I remember Stuart showing and indicating under the mulch, or of the hemp with the jalapenos, how well they did without any inputs. So that is a good indication around how your soil health is, because you will not get the productivity that is reported there if the soil health is not optimal. But one of the good indicators, and we are doing some work actually in Tobago with that, one of the good indicators we have is macro reports. That is something farmers could typically associate with good soil health. So if you're going there and you're not seeing in your soil some of those key macro reports, the main one being earthworms, if you are not seeing those in your soil, generally it means that something is going on with that food web, within the soil, and hence you are not necessarily optimizing the soil health, in terms of ensuring that that diversity is there. So that's one of the key visual observations that we can make to associate what might be a good biological indicator of soil health. Thank you.
For me, it's less about the old school chemical analysis of soil test. It doesn't, that is still a tool, and I'm not going to dissuade anyone from utilizing it. I typically use a chemical analysis, the more standard historic laboratory analysis, if I'm really trying to drill into or dial in a particular deficiency that I'm seeing. In general, though, you know, the pH probably has the greatest indicators of where I'm at, unless I'm looking for an extreme case for production of a more acid loving crop. But in general, if we're in that 6.5 to 7.2 range, that pH is the biggest indicator for me, and organic matter. So yes, the arthropods, the macropores, the micropores, you know, the biology, but the biological components of it, the organic matter, and then the relationship to pH and those biological indicators are really more important to me to soil health than a nutrient elemental analysis that you would see from years past, or what our predecessors were instructed to do, unless you're looking to identify specific soil deficiency or nutrient deficiencies.
All right. We are way past where we should have been at this point in time, but this clearly is very informative, which is why we have kept it going. There is one question, Stuart, that I want to get in for you before we have to. All right. Well, I suppose we don't have enough time to do it, but clearly we will have other occasions and
Sure.
opportunities to engage in this kind of a way. So what I'm going to do then is to take final comments from each of you. Let us start with you, Kingsley.
Well, I just want to encourage everybody just to, if you haven't been thinking of this formula, just to get on board. I can say for myself, it has saved money in the pocket, and it has been a real blessing to me in terms of controlling pests and just getting the type of nutrients and moisture that I need in the soil. So just want to encourage everybody just to get on board and just get knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge out there. UA provides a lot of knowledge, and there are other organizations like Source and Support and this Genesis project. Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of UA, Dr. Eudoxie.
Thank you. I think I want to just echo that sentiment and say that cover crops are like preventative methods or approaches to maintaining and enhancing what's in the soil, things that we don't particularly think about a lot. So investing in a cover crop is more than just ensuring that, you have, for instance, the erosion, the pest control. What you are doing is investing in your soil that you require as the most critical input into your production system. So I just want to encourage the viewers to recognize that the systems that you use and the approaches that you use are entwined with your soil, and you should be thinking about what can I do to maintain and enhance that soil health. And that approach of introducing cover crops as a tool within a more systematic approach is a very, very good one. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much. Mr. Wally?
Thank you very much for the invitation. And I, as well as the other participants, encourage everybody to study further and listen. We've had some very good presentations, very excellent, in fact. And please also consider the entomology of certain pests. That's very important. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much. And the final comments now from Dr. Stuart Wise.
Yes, well, thank everyone for attending. This has hopefully been informative for me, and anytime we can integrate more farmer input is going to be a tremendous resource. So that really is one of my big ones. Find a farmer that's close to you that's doing this work. Find a farmer that you can look to for advisement and support. the farmer that's doing it, and Kingsley's our featured farmer, his experience and his trials and errors are really what's going to help you succeed. So, we know that farmers typically don't listen to the experts as much, and they typically will go and listen to the farmer. And so if your farmer's doing it and being successful, then that's the proof that is going to persuade and get these changes to happen. And when you see your farmer next to you saving money, less labor, or reduced inputs, and with greater productivity and greater return and higher quality produce, it's an easy thing to transition to. That's where it really matters. So find a farmer that's doing it, and work with them. And then once you start doing it and seeing it, share that information with your neighbor farmer as well and help them. And that's how we can move this along. There's a lot of other resources that are available. I put a few just quick links I grabbed off of YouTube about how to do the crimping method with a board and a rope. And those are in, I know, our participant or in our speaker backstage comments, but if those links could be put into the other one, I'm not sure if they were or not. Maybe they were. Then you can look at that. But you can homemade the crimper. You can do it with a drum filled with water, and you can do it with a board and ropes. You can do it small scale, large scale. So my last parting advice is, don't let one small thing or an idea that you don't have the resource to do it stop you from integrating the cover crop practices, because where there's a will, there's a way, and someone else out there has probably already invented it or adapted a system that will work for you. It's just a matter of trying it, and don't be afraid to experiment, because as a farmer, every single year is an experiment as to whether it's going to work or not. And so we're always constantly adapting and changing. And by doing so, we'll find those practices that work typically more consistently, that give us the results that we're looking for.
Thank you so very much for that. Every single year is an experiment.
That's right.
That
Every
is the
crop.
truth. That is the truth. Thank you so very much. Thank you to Mr. Guerin, who had to leave us, and of course to Dr. Wise. We say to Mr. Wally, thank you, Dr. Eudoxie. We thank you all. Kingsley Carter, tremendous information provided here today. And I know that the team from JOAM, you're going to be pulling this together so it can be shared with those who are on the platform. Big thank you to Colleen Williams. We say thank you as well to Nicola Shirley Phillips, to Janice Dehaney, and the entire team for making this possible. And we could not have done this without Danielle and Mike from CariFlow. Thank you all. And I know that you're all going to be joining us for the next in the series, whenever that comes up. I'm sure the invitations will go out. Blessings to you, and blessings for a wonderful Christmas season and a great new year ahead.